Amen. Let the doors be open. Orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Orders of the day, ordre du jour. Government Bills Commons, resuming consideration at second reading of Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and to make consequential amendments to certain acts.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Willowdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a great honour to rise today in support of Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The proposed legislation fulfills a key campaign promise from the 2015 election and represents a thoughtful and long overdue modernization of Canada's security framework. Allow me to begin by referring to the Prime Minister's mandate letter to the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness that unambiguously referenced the quote-unquote overarching goal of keeping Canadians safe. This goal must be pursued while protecting the rights of Canadians and with an appreciation that threats to public security arise from many sources, including natural disasters, inadequate regulations, crime, terrorism, weather-related emergencies, and public health emergencies. End of quote. What we are discussing here today is at the intersection of defense policy, foreign policy, and national security. The rationale behind this mandate is self-evident. We live in a world of new, ever-evolving, and unprecedented security threats. Just this past March, a lone wolf attack on a Canadian Forces recruitment centre in my riding of Willowdale underscored this point. While I am grateful for the incredible bravery and professionalism the RCMP and others displayed in responding to the attack, the fact remains we are largely operating in a brave new world, where groups and individuals can pose serious challenges to our safety and security. Meeting these challenges while maintaining our respect for the cherished rights and freedoms of Canadians requires a robust and responsible parliamentary framework. While the previous government curiously failed to recognize this, something I can assure you I heard repeatedly at the doorsteps, it is my belief that Bill C-22 rectifies the obvious gaps within our existing security framework, namely by establishing a National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. This committee would be provided extraordinary access to national security information and unprecedented ability to scrutinize federal departments and operations. In doing so, Bill C-22 rejects the notion that we must choose between prioritizing security concerns on the one hand and respecting civil and charter rights on the other. Rather, it establishes a framework that balances both. The issue of accountability boils down to this: does Canada have the institutions it needs to protect the safety of Canadians while at the same time safeguarding our rights and freedoms? Bill C-22 ensures that we can answer that question in the affirmative. The concept of establishing a Parliamentary Security Oversight Committee is hardly novel. The idea can be traced as far back as the 1981 MacDonald Commission report, while more recent efforts include a 2003 Auditor General's report, recommendations from the 2004 Interim Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security, 2005's National Security Committee of Parliamentarians Act, a 2009 recommendation from the House of Commons Public Safety Committee, a 2011 Senate report, and private members' bills introduced in 2007, 2009, 2013, and 2014, and of course, most recently by my Liberal colleagues from Malpeque and Vancouver Quadra. Over the past decade, these efforts were repeatedly obstructed and denied by the previous Conservative government, despite widespread support amongst experts, stakeholders, academics, non-governmental organizations, and of course, the Canadian public. While there is no making up for this lost decade, I am proud to say that Bill C-22 finally provides Canadians with a modern and meaningful security oversight mechanism. In keeping with our government's commitment to evidence-based decision-making, Bill C-22 notably aligns Canada's security regime with accepted international best practices. As colleagues before me have highlighted, Canada is currently the only member of the Five Eyes Alliance lacking a security oversight committee that grants sitting legislatures access to confidential national security information. In an era in which security threats are increasingly global and interdependent, Canada cannot afford to be an outlier on this issue. This absence of oversight has limited the ability of parliamentarians to examine national security issues in depth. The previous government argued that there was no need for parliamentarians to have access to confidential national security information. On this side of the House, we certainly disagree. Giving parliamentarians access to such information will benefit Canadians who want their government to be open and transparent, including our national security agencies. As Professors Craig Forsesi of the University of Ottawa and Kent Roach of the University of Toronto recently noted in their working paper to modernize Canada's inadequate review of national security, a robust national review framework rests on three pillars. First, a properly resourced and empowered committee of parliamentarians with robust access to secret information charged primarily with strategic issues, including an emphasis on efficacy review. Second, a consolidated and enhanced expert review body, a security and intelligence community reviewer, or super SIRC with all of government jurisdiction, capable of raising efficacy issues but charged primarily with proprietary review. Third, an independent monitor of national security law built on the UK and Australian model with robust access to secret information and charged with expert analysis of Canada's anti-terrorism and national security legislation and able to work in concert with the other bodies on specific issues. It is my belief, Madam Speaker, that this bill meets these criteria. Professor Forsesi, I would argue, would appear to agree, writing as he did that C-22 represents a good bill. He goes on to say it creates a stronger body than the UK and Australian equivalents and that it constitutes, quote unquote, a dramatic change for Canadian national security accountability. I believe that this legislation is well-intentioned, considered, and well-rounded. In particular, I would like to highlight 5 notable elements of the bill. First, Bill C-22 allows the committee to analyze and study laws, policies, and operations in real time, increasing the discipline, responsiveness, and accountability of our security framework. Second, the legislation before us tasks the committee with the invaluable capacity to monitor classified security and intelligence activities and report findings to the Prime Minister, rather than reviewing security activities on an ad hoc and siloed department-by-department basis. Bill C-22, therefore, provides the opportunity for comprehensive security oversight. Third, the provisions regarding ministerial discretion on limits to access to information contained within the bill are clearly delineated and follow the best practice models established by the United States, Australia, and others. Fourth, Bill C-22 guarantees that the government will constitute a minority within the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, thus ensuring increased accountability. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, Bill C-22 represents an important counterbalance to the sweeping powers introduced through Bill C-51. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, this bill represents the fulfillment of a key campaign pledge on the part of the government to rein in the excesses of Bill C-51 while ensuring the collective security of all Canadians. The introduction of a committee of parliamentarians tasked with overseeing Canadian security and intelligence represents a much-needed return to accountability. This bill, however, merely represents one part of the puzzle. Our government has also committed to amending C-51 to better protect the rights of assembly and protest and to better define rules regarding terrorist propaganda, mandating statutory review of national security legislation, creating an Office of Community Outreach, and counter-radicalization, and increase consultations with Canadians from coast to coast on how best to balance security concerns and civil liberties. This process, both within and outside Parliament, will allow us to strengthen the security and intelligence system of Canada. It will also provide Canadians with confidence that in protecting their safety and security, the government stands firmly behind their rights and freedoms. Madam Speaker, I urge all honourable members of this House to join me in supporting this bill. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his remarks. The Minister earlier has said that this committee is to be modelled after the UK committee, and clearly in the UK, the committee members themselves are the ones who get to appoint their chair or to elect their chair. Now here we have not only is the chair appointed by the Prime Minister, he's appointed with a huge increase in salary, and he's appointed long before the committee even exists. So I'm going to ask my colleague, how can he actually expect us to believe that this is a nonpartisan committee when the committee chair is appointed by the Prime Minister before the committee has even been struck? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Willowdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to first of all thank the member opposite for raising this significant issue. It's interesting to note that he's acknowledging that, of course, there was an absence of a framework in Canada previously. Of course, to rectify this situation, we looked at models adopted by other allies, crucially, the Five Eyes. Of course, it would have been impossible for us to adopt a framework that would simply cut and paste provisions that have been adopted by the other Five Eyes. In this particular instance, obviously, there are variations between our framework and those of the other Five Eyes. What you are speaking of course, is the issue of accountability. And you will note, should you scrutinize the proposed legislation closely,
Member to address the question to the chair and not to the member. So when you're saying you, it should be through me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member opposite has raised the issue of accountability. I would like to remind the member, of course, that in making appointments to this committee, the Prime Minister is obliged to both consult with the leaders of the opposition as well as the Senate. And in so doing, it will ensure that only 4 members out of 9 will be constituted out of members of this government. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy to rise on behalf of my constituents on this important issue. There are international issues like international diversity, tax evasion, climate change are serious issues that require international coordination. And unfortunately, today we need to add to that terrorism and all of those activities that must be monitored carefully. I'm happy to see that our government will be, I hope, joining in on this oversight of our surveillance bodies. I think it's important for us to have access to a committee like this. Now, when I hear the member opposite say, well, we need to have confidence the Prime Minister will do this and do that, I'd like to point out that we've been waiting for changes in a number of areas, because at a committee, people said that C-51 was problematic, and it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. We shouldn't be adding more hay to it. I'd like to hear the member's comments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the member opposite for raising that critical issue. Of course, we think it's imperative that the Canadian public has confidence in this committee. I think it's significant that the Prime Minister will only make appointments to this committee after consulting with members opposite, with leaders of the opposition parties, and of course also with the Senate. Of course, the member brought up the issue of Bill C-51. I can assure him that we also had misgivings about it, and for that reason, we did introduce 10 amendments at the time, but of course, only 3 were adopted. So what we have sought to do in the proposed legislation is to balance the rights and civil liberties of Canadians with security interests. And I think we've struck the right balance. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to join this debate on Bill C-22, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians Act. Above all else, governments must be able to ensure the safety and security of the citizens they serve. All of us here in this place share in this duty. Our public safety institutions take many forms and have different resources to fulfill their different mandates. Day in and day out, the people who keep us safe work to balance national security concerns with the privacy rights that Canadians expect and deserve, and they do an excellent job. They work diligently under challenging circumstances and deserve our gratitude. The bill being considered here today would create a statutory committee of parliamentarians appointed by the executive branch and housed within it. In Canada, the executive branch is the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office that supports it. This would be a committee of parliamentarians and not a parliamentary minister of its own affairs and has standing orders and practices. The members of a parliamentary committee are named by each member's whip and not by the Prime Minister. The chair of a parliamentary committee is elected by its members. This new National Security and Intelligence Committee will have none of that. According to the government's press release, the committee would have a mandate to scrutinize any matter related to the national security of Canada. Unfortunately, the fine print isn't as generous concerning the responsibilities the committee and its members will have. Under this bill, the Prime Minister and his ministers will be allowed to withhold information requested by the committee if they consider that the disclosure of the requested information would negatively impact national security. However, while the responsible minister would be expected to provide the committee with the rationale on his or her decision to hold back information, in practice, this just won't work. You can't ask for something if you don't know it exists. And if you are told that something exists, but you can't see it because of national security concerns, the entire point of having a committee to reinforce the oversight of Canada's security apparatus disappears. A member, or anyone for that matter, cannot be expected to work with only partial information. As prescribed in the bill, the committee would be a creation of the executive branch, and its dealings would be kept secret. Therefore, it is difficult to identify what resources a member of the committee would have at their disposal if they were dissatisfied or frustrated in their role. Furthermore, if a member of the committee has a major concern with the information they receive in testimony or through a brief, the member can only report their concerns to the Prime Minister or the minister responsible. Presuming the Prime Minister doesn't share the same security concern, he does not have to act on it, and the member cannot bring his or her trepidation to the elected House of Commons, or to anyone for that matter, because they have been sworn to secrecy. The way this committee would be set up makes me think of the philosophical thought experiment of, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? If members can't speak about what they have been briefed on, does it even matter if they have been briefed? While it may be premature to speculate on what the committee will actually do, it is no stretch to imagine that the committee will meet semi-regularly and be given access to documents and testimony that an already existing parliamentary committee would receive, and members could access via access to information requests. Assuming that the committee finds itself in agreement on recommendations, the government will review the committee's report before it can be tabled in Parliament. If the purpose of the committee is indeed to provide elected members of Parliament with a greater role in overseeing Canada's national security institutions, then I really don't understand why the inputs and the outputs of the committee will be screened by the Prime Minister. Given how the government is proposing to structure this committee, I'm unsure whether the Prime Minister believes that elected members of Parliament can be trusted to steward the information they receive with care and discretion. If the Minister of Public Safety is truly intent on creating a National Security Oversight Committee, then the committee should have real oversight over our national security agencies. Unfortunately, as it is being set up, the national security agencies would have oversight over the work of the committee. Moving on, the Prime Minister or Minister will also have the responsibility to name the chair of the committee. This is problematic, as we've already heard during this debate. It reinforces the impression that the committee is just a PMO working group. It is understood that a chair of a committee plays a critical role as the spokesperson for the matters that are directed to the committee, and committee reports are published through the chair. In order for this committee to be successful and have legitimacy, I believe the chair must be chosen by the members of the committee. Now, I understand that in a majority government situation, as we find ourselves in right now, the members of the governing party will never select an opposition member as their chair. Interestingly enough, while we are debating this bill, the Prime Minister has already appointed the member from Ottawa South to chair the committee. That is a clear sign that the government is unwilling to compromise on this specific aspect of the legislation. Taking this into consideration, together with the bill before us, more than anything, this committee appears to be a make-work project for members of Parliament and a way for the Prime Minister to deflect any criticism on his action or inaction, for that matter, on national security matters. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'd like to conclude by making a few remarks about the role of members of Parliament and how this legislation fits into a disturbing trend that I have observed over the past 11 months. Members, even if they were elected as members of the governing party, have not been elected to serve the government. This legislation serves to reverse this relationship by making members work for government. While members of the governing party argue that the government is giving parliamentarians access to more information, this bill, in its current form, makes it difficult to believe. The real test of whether the committee will have any teeth and impact on policy will be on whether it can freely report its findings with the weight of Parliament behind it. Again, this bill ensures that this simply won't happen because the Prime Minister and his ministers will be able to read any report from the committee before it is made public, if it is made public at all. Ultimately, this bill's stated purpose is to empower members of Parliament. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I sincerely hope that the government will take the advice and concerns of members from all parties that have been raised seriously and into consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle.
Well, member for Laurentides-Labelle.
We had 2 senators and 3 members of the opposition given access to classified material. The Prime Minister's ability to filter the information is limited to ensuring that classified material doesn't get out. How is this not accountable? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Well, Madam Speaker, as we have seen with events around the world, we definitely can't take our security for granted. And it is not difficult to understand why the disclosure of sensitive information may put the lives of very good men and women who protect us at risk. But you can't provide oversight of an organization if you are not given the oversight and the information to do that. Heavily redacted documents and briefings being offered to a panel of members of Parliament will not make Canada safer. For this committee to work, the Prime Minister cannot filter the committee's activities. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek for her remarks. But my question goes back to the previous Parliament. What she's described as being needed as an oversight committee, I share some of the same reservations about what the Liberals are proposing and would probably support what she's talking about. But my question is, when your previous government introduced C-51, why didn't they include an oversight committee? Why didn't you do what you're talking about today at the time C-51 was introduced?
I just want to remind the member to address the question to the chair, and I can tell you that I'm not the one that did it. So the honourable member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I do thank my honourable colleague for the question. Ensuring the safety and security of our country's citizens has always been a top priority for the Conservative caucus. And we understand it is important that our national security agencies have the tools that they need to do their job, which is to keep us safe. And that was the purpose of C-51. The legislation we have before us is unrelated to C-51. As is, this legislation will not make Canadians safer, nor will it increase Parliament's oversight of Canada's national security agencies. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if the member opposite could expand a little bit on the fact that unlike some of our allies, like the U.S. and New Zealand, the government members will actually be in a minority position on the committee, this oversight committee, and if she thinks that contributes in any amount to more accountability.
For Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Well, Madam Speaker, we know that as the committee structure has been proposed in this bill, it is clear and apparent that there will be 7 members from Parliament, 2 members from the Senate. The chair has already been chosen. And I have to suggest, in answer to that question, that if the mandate of the committee and the practice that's set out in legislation does not provide the committee to do the work that it needs to do, it really doesn't matter who's sitting on the committee.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
I thank you, and I congratulate my honourable colleague for her nice oversight on this legislation. The question is, as this is being formed as a committee of parliamentarians, where the chair has been appointed by the Prime Minister, this is already a sign of no accountability whatsoever, and probably the committee will be powerless. Doesn't the honourable member believe that is the fact?
From the member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for his question. As has been mentioned many times before, we know that the Minister of Public Safety was in the UK touting that this committee was going to be modelled after the United Kingdom, where their committees elect their chair. And yet, here we are, debating the bill, and the member for Ottawa South has already been appointed. And in fact, he was appointed back in January. And how did parliamentarians find out about this appointment? Through the media. This bill has not been open to consultation by the members of the opposition, and I think that speaks volumes when it comes to the role of this committee.
Resuming debate, the prise de débat, the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And just to conclude on my question was specifically about whether or not the member opposite felt there was more accountability in the fact that we had a minority representation on the committee. I didn't really get an answer to that, so I can only assume that she agrees that there would be more accountability. But it is, Madam Speaker, my pleasure to rise in the House today to speak to Bill C-22, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians Act. Madam Speaker, this bill is of incredible importance and is part of this government's larger plan to rectify the Harper Conservatives' flawed attempt at anti-terrorism legislation, which infringed upon the most basic rights in an ill attempt to make Canadians safer. I am happy to see this piece of legislation before the House, which was promised in the last election, and I believe an overwhelming number of Canadians support. Madam Speaker, I am proud to represent the riding of Kingston and the Islands, and I have always enjoyed engaging with constituents on matters of importance to them. A common concern raised in my riding was in regards to the flawed Bill C-51. My constituents were concerned about their rights and freedoms and how they would be affected by it. Although it's true that the government must be equipped to adequately meet the security challenges of the day, Madam Speaker, they must never lose sight of their responsibility to be accountable to Canadians. This bill begins to deal with many of the concerns raised by Canadians with respect to Bill C-51. The government has listened and is delivering on this important promise made. I believe this legislation ensures faithful compliance with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and is in line with what Canadians elected this government to do. Madam Speaker, in my opinion, Bill C-22 is required to establish accountability and ensure Canadians' rights and freedoms are respected. Reforming the flawed provisions enacted by the Harper government is crucial in protecting Canadians' rights and freedoms of expression, which is of the utmost importance to healthy democracy. Bill C-51 set the course to erode this most fundamental right, a right which should never be taken lightly and should always be guarded with the utmost respect. Canadians pride themselves, Madam Speaker, on living in a democratic country, and they deserve their government to respect their rights and freedoms, period. This legislation before us sets the stage to ensure those rights and freedoms are respected, while at the same time safeguarding Canadians against challenging realities and the changing realities of the serious threats posed throughout the world. Madam Speaker, I am proud to stand with a government that does not use the politics of fear. I am proud to support a government whose policies are based on evidence and fact. It would be much easier, Madam Speaker, as the previous government did, to scare Canadians into believing that certain measures were paramount to their safety, even if the measures meant infringing upon their most basic rights and freedoms. But this government will not do that, Madam Speaker. They will not use fear to advance their political agenda, as we have seen in the past. What we see before us today, Madam Speaker, is the proper way to establish safety and security while respecting the rights of Canadians. These changes are long overdue, and I am glad to see this government fulfilling a promise Canadians elected us to do, to protect Canada's national security and the rights and freedoms, while at the same time protecting us from the realities of a changing world. Madam Speaker, I listened carefully to the debates in the House throughout this week, and I heard concerns over openness and accountability of the committee proposed in this legislation. Let me assure you, Madam Speaker, that I too expect the government to be accountable, and that is why I see this legislation as being a necessity. This legislation strikes the right balance. It protects Canada's national security while at the same time allowing for accountable oversights to Canadians. This legislation has the proper checks and balances in place to address the concerns raised in the House during the debate this week. By establishing the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, this committee will have representation from both the upper house and the lower house, charged with having a nonpartisan responsibility to report on security matters in the interest of all Canadians. Members on this committee will be granted unprecedented access to classified material in order for them to adequately carry out their mandate. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, with the current challenges Canada faces, this is a crucial step in ensuring Canada is prepared for what the future brings. By creating the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians, this government is ensuring that there is appropriate oversight and accountability moving forward. Specifically, this committee will have the ability to review the full range of national security activities, including all departments and agencies across the Government of Canada, and be able to gain a full picture of what is being done by those government agencies in national security and intelligence matters. Committees have been referred to as the backbone of Parliament. This committee will work to ensure our national security is effective at keeping Canadians safe, and that Canadians' rights are being safeguarded. In fact, Madam Speaker, Canada is currently the only Five Eyes ally without parliamentary review. The US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand all have similar committees to the one proposed in this bill. Many of the allies formed these committees in the late 80s and 90s. Madam Speaker, that means that Canada is already lagging behind our allies. We are long overdue to set up this oversight, which is in the best interest of Canadians. Actually, Madam Speaker, I am proud to see the broad scope of this committee and believe it has the potential to be a stronger body than those seen in other countries. This is significant for Canada, as it has the potential to be the most effective committee within the Five Eyes group. Something else caught my attention On Tuesday, Madam Speaker, my colleague from Louis-Hébert pointed out that 4 former Prime Ministers, both Liberal and Conservative, have recommended an oversight committee be formed. All 4 called for an independent committee to review the actions of our intelligence agencies. But that's not all, Madam Speaker. 4 Supreme Court justices and 4 former ministers also support the concept of this committee. Madam Speaker, I am proud to join with those former Prime Ministers, Supreme Court justices and justice ministers, as well as the current government and Canadians from across this country in supporting this bill. This is not a place for blind partisanship, Madam Speaker, but an opportunity to fix our currently flawed system. Madam Speaker, as one of my colleagues across the aisle said earlier in this debate, good oversight not only builds public trust, but it must make our security services much more effective. And that is exactly what this legislation allows for. This committee provides the oversight necessary to maintain accountability and ensure Canadians' safety and rights are maintained. I urge all my colleagues to put their partisanship aside and see this important bill passed in this House. I see no reason why this legislation should not receive all party approval. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for his speech. I'd like to put aside partisanship, but it seems to me that with this committee that's recommended, that the Prime Minister has already picked the chair, that the Prime Minister will be selecting senators, which he selected, and that the Prime Minister has the right to edit the committee reports that come out. So I think that's fairly partisan on the other side, and I wondered how the member would respond.
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question because I've been hearing it all week, and I look forward to the opportunity to respond to it. The truth of the matter is that the opposition is painting this in a way as though it's a one-of-a-kind event that the Prime Minister would make this appointment. But in fact, there's been much precedent set for the Prime Minister making appointments like this. And quite frankly, I think it's I think it shows great accountability when the Prime Minister makes this appointment. When this appointment is made by the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister becomes the accountable individual because he or she, whoever the Prime Minister of the day is, made this appointment, and they're the ones that will ultimately have to live with the realities of making that appointment.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this bill highlights the difference between the Liberals and the New Democrats last Parliament. The Liberals, of course, voted in this House in favour of Bill C-51, and the only problem they had with the bill was its lack of oversight, which was, of course, a problem with the bill. What didn't seem to trouble the Liberals was C-51's massive violations of Canadian civil liberties, and I'll go over some of them. C-51 criminalizes speech acts that have no connection with terrorism. It allows government departments to share private information of Canadians without their consent. It permits police to arrest, detain, and impose conditions on Canadians who have not been charged with a single crime based on mere suspicion. This bill before the House, make no mistake, doesn't touch a single one of those violations of Canadian civil liberties or freedoms in C-51. All it does is deal with oversight. So I'm wondering, my friend gave a great speech talking about Canadians' civil liberties and freedoms. When will the Liberal government introduce legislation to change C-51 to actually respect that?
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To suggest that the Liberal Party of the day had no problems with Bill C-51, I think is a great misrepresentation of the actual facts. In fact, the Liberal Party, Madam Speaker, had a number of concerns, put forward a number of recommendations to change that. The difference between the Liberal Party and the New Democrats, Madam Speaker, is that we value both the safeguards of Canadians while at the same time their right for freedom of expressions and the other rights that are granted to them. So yes, there is a difference between the NDP and the Liberals, Madam Speaker, and it is the fact that we value both, not one with more priority than the other.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Ottawa West Orleans.
Nepean,
sorry.
Ottawa West Nepean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question to my honourable colleague is that we promised that we would do things differently, that we would work more closely with the opposition parties, with all parties in this House, that we would give the legislative branch more say, and also that we would allow more oversight. Could the honourable member please let us know how this particular bill is going to allow us to do all three of those things?
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague for a question. Yes, this bill will give us the ability to have more oversight, to see when, what the particular agencies are doing and how they're acting, to have this classified information, and to have parliamentarians at the helm of understanding and appreciating what is going on. This is in keeping with our 5 allies and what they've been doing in some cases for many decades. We're not setting a new course here, Madam Speaker. As a matter of fact, we're the last of our 5 allies to put these measures in place to ensure these accountabilities are there. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to rise in the House today to speak in support of Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. Madam Speaker, with this bill, our government is fulfilling a key commitment that we made to Canadians to ensure that our national security framework is working effectively to keep Canadians safe and to ensure that our rights and freedoms are safeguarded. Far too often, Madam Speaker, I've heard in this House that the great imperatives of every government to keep its citizens safe and to safeguard our rights and freedoms is being spoken of as if we are required to make a choice, a compromise, or a calculation. The very nature of the public discourse suggests that it may be necessary to sacrifice one in order to achieve the other. And, Madam Speaker, I respectfully disagree. I believe that it is the responsibility of every government, and by that I mean every member of this House, to ensure that we achieve both safety and freedom in equal measure. Now, Madam Speaker, I have had the opportunity over the course of my life to be involved in operational matters of national security. And in these operational matters, I wanted to share some of my experience. There is always a tension that exists between those who are responsible for gathering national security intelligence, those responsible for gathering evidence for prosecutions, and those who have the responsibility of making sure nothing bad happens in any of our communities. And that tension is often resolved through certain guiding principles. Madam Speaker, the principles that guide the work of those dedicated men and women who have responsibility for keeping our community safe while adhering to the rule of law are precisely these things. The rule of law, the highest of which in this country is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is the responsibility not only to obey those laws, but to uphold them to be respected, and to be honoured throughout the country. We are also guided by the important principle of public interest. Madam Speaker, it's important that those who are responsible for keeping us safe do the right thing. And that means, of course, not merely obeying the law, because this can lead to situations that in my old business we used to call lawful but awful, but respecting the public interest, ensuring that we are doing the right things, and that we are doing them in such a way that will engender the respect and the trust of the public. And, Madam Speaker, that brings me to the most important principle that always had to guide the work of those of us who were responsible and tasked with keeping our community safe, and that is maintaining the public trust. Now, maintaining the public trust is based upon a number of things. Certainly the rule of law and acting in the public interest are important, but it also requires transparency and accountability. And this is particularly difficult in circumstances where the work is done in secret, where we are engaged in activities which is clandestine, covert, which is classified and secret, when it is not in the public interest to disclose to the public what we know or the means by which we came to know it. It is not in the public interest that that information become known to those who would do harm in our communities. And so then, how can the public be assured that those tasked with safeguarding their security and their rights have obeyed the rule of law and acted in the public interest? Madam Speaker, it comes down to who guards the guards. And so, I believe that Bill C-22 allows for a more fulsome answer to this critical question in Canadian governance. Madam Speaker, I have been the beneficiary of both good governance and bad governance. And I can tell you from my experience that doing the job right is it requires good governance. And that means the effective operation of a national security framework requires that we have in place governance and oversight mechanisms that work for us. Now, Madam Speaker, we already have a fairly robust system of oversight for national security. We have ministerial oversight. And in many of our laws, it requires the explicit consent of the relevant minister in order for those enforcement and intelligence gathering agencies to proceed and to do their job. Much of their work is required judicial oversight in ensuring that certain legal thresholds are met. The organizations and the individuals who are responsible for this work are guided by internal policy. In addition to that, we have other important review bodies. CSIS, for example, is governed and overseen by the Security Intelligence Review Committee, which has access to certain classified information to review the work of CSIS. The work of our RCMP officers and other police services are subject to the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission and other oversight bodies to ensure that they are obeying the rule of law and acting in the public interest. And CSE is overseen by the Office of Communications Security and Established Commission. In addition to that work, Madam Speaker, this Parliament has a number of parliamentary committees. I think it's very important to acknowledge in this work that the committee that's being proposed in Bill C-22 is not a committee of Parliament. It is not a committee of either House of Parliament or of both houses. It is instead an additional review mechanism to ensure Canadians that we are, in fact, effective in our oversight and control of the extraordinary powers that are given. I can tell you from experience, Madam Speaker and members of this House, that those who are tasked with this responsibility welcome oversight. They welcome that accountability. It is important to them that oversight and that governance exists, because without the public trust of the important work that they are doing, they cannot succeed in their dual mission of both maintaining safety and upholding the rights of our citizens. And so this measure is an important measure to fulfill our commitment to providing effective governance and oversight of national security matters and to the protection of the rights and freedoms of our citizens. Madam Speaker, I believe that this committee, in its composition as proposed under this bill, will be an effective mechanism to ensure that matters are dealt with across various government agencies. In my experience, keeping our country safe, upholding our laws and freedoms, is the responsibility not of a single agency of government, but of all agencies of government. In far too many cases, we have seen that the oversight of one is unable to review the activities of all of those bodies that are engaged in this important activity, and as a result, a number of gaps in information sharing and our effectiveness has been compromised. And through the introduction of this new review committee, I believe that we will enable our government to assure Canadians that those gaps are closed, that the work of all committees is operating in a collaborative way and a more effective way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Government House Leader has a point of order.
I know that there was a great amount of interest in the event that the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard is scheduled to attend next week. As the Minister stated, the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner has approved his presence at the event. To further that point, I will now table in both official languages the email response from the Ethics Commissioner's office related to this event. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And so tabled, the questions and comments, questions et commentaires, the Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
I'd like to congratulate the member opposite for his speech. I walked this morning with him to work, and I hope that Canada will be safer after Bill C-22, although I do believe that how can this bill guarantee accountability and public trust where the chair of the committee is being parachuted by the Prime Minister into the committee members?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my member both for our conversation this morning as we walked together to this House and also for his important question. Madam Speaker, I think it's important to understand the function of this committee. and the function of its chair. As I've already stated, this is not a parliamentary committee. We have parliamentary committees, and we have well-accepted rules among ourselves on how their leadership and chairs will be appointed. This committee has a very, very special responsibility, and it is not a committee of this House, but it is a committee of parliamentarians that the Prime Minister is tasking with an important role. All Canadians in this House will be tasking with an important role of providing effective, non-partisan oversight of all of the activities of government in maintaining the national security and upholding our rights and freedoms. I think it's an incredibly important task, Madam Speaker, and I think I am proud, I will tell you, I am proud that my government proposes to form a committee that is not, as we have seen in the past perhaps, dominated by the majority of members from the governing House, but rather a committee which is truly representative of the great diversity of opinion and perspectives that is this House and is this country. And I'm very proud of the fact that this committee will be comprised of members of both sides of this House and of the other place to bring that diversity of perspective and to engender that public trust that must inevitably come from Canadians knowing that their representatives, who are accountable to them, are there, know the secrets, and have access to sufficient information to hold those who are entrusted with their safety accountable for doing it right.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Obviously don't have as much practical experience as my colleague, but just logically, if the mandate of the Watchdog Committee is to oversee security and intelligence gathering, well, the whole story of looking for a needle in a haystack, well, even the watchdog is going to have more of a haystack to comb through, right?
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I thank the member opposite for his question. In my experience in dealing of matters of national security, having the information, in order to be held accountable, in order to hold others accountable, it's important to have the right information at the right time. But operational matters, because of their very nature, do require that certain information remain classified, that certain types of intelligence gathering and certain ongoing operations remain secret. It's very much in the public interest. But I think we are making a huge step forward in creating greater transparency and far greater accountability. I will tell you, previously, the national security framework was mostly under the control of a government and a minister, and who kept those secrets closely guarded to their vest. And there was very little trust of the other members of this House. This is an act of trust. This bill says that we trust parliamentarians from the other parties and from all parts of Canada to do the job of protecting our rights and freedoms and for making sure that our national security framework is effective in both keeping our citizens safe and protecting their freedoms. And so
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments?
Parliamentary Secretary to, sorry. The Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra, sorry, I have to get your title.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the eloquent words from the member from Scarborough Southwest. As someone who has both been in a security role at the highest level in his career and now is in a role of representing the citizenry, the people, and their concerns about security as well as about respect for civil rights and privacy, can he share his thoughts about how this Oversight and Review Committee will improve the results of our agencies on both those fronts, both the security and privacy and rights?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for the opportunity to speak to this very important issue. Madam Speaker, in my experience, those who are tasked with the responsibility of keeping us safe often are faced with difficult choices. And the imperative of protecting our citizens and making cases against those who would harm us sometimes can lead to errors in judgment with the exercise of those authorities. And we believe, and in my experience, my colleagues who do this important work across the country believe very sincerely that we need the value added of strict oversight and governance, a clear, impartial, independent review of how those extraordinary authorities are given to us. You know, this is kind of the deal with everyone who engages in law enforcement or national security and public safety. We accept additional authorities that are given to us by the government and by the people. And in return, we must be fully accountable for the use of those authorities. We must uphold and respect the rule of law. And in order to achieve that, in order to be able to provide the country and its citizens with the reassurance that those extraordinary powers and authorities are being used in the public interest and according to the rule of law, that independent oversight is critical. And so this bill finally provides that effective oversight and governance of those extraordinary authorities. And I know with great confidence that those men and women, the extraordinary men and women dedicated to keeping us safe and upholding our laws, will welcome this level of oversight being provided under this bill.
Statements by members, déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is the 4th annual Orange Shirt Day. Every Child Matters. This nationally recognized movement commemorates the thousands of Indigenous children across Canada who were taken from their homes and sent to a residential school. The legacy of this day stems from the experience of a 6-year-old girl named Phyllis Webstad, who had her shiny new orange shirt taken from her upon arriving at a residential school. The orange shirt represents the loss of culture, identity, and language for thousands of Indigenous children, the effects of which are still felt to this day. The Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs is mandated to work with Indigenous communities to gain back the culture and identity that was lost. Although efforts such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada have made strides to making amends with Canada's Indigenous population, continued efforts are needed to heal the wounds inflicted by residential schools. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Whitby.
Madam President, on September 10th, residents in my riding of Whitby participated in the annual Brooklyn Harvest Festival. This family-friendly day marks the start of the harvest season and an opportunity to celebrate our local farmers and thank them for all that they do for our community.
This year's event was very successful. The new location was filled with many people, and it was very popular. Participants could sample things, purchase flowers, and see other agricultural products from the region, as well as taking advantage of local entertainment.
Residents of Whitby, I extend my deepest appreciation to everyone who contributed to making this year's festival the best yet. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sarnia Lambton.
Madam Speaker, scientific research is alive and well, not just across Canada, but it's thriving in my riding as well. Yesterday, it was announced that the Western Research Park, which includes the Western Sarnia-Lambton Research Park, received the 2016 Outstanding Research Park Award from the Association of University Research Parks. This international recognition makes Western the first research park in Ontario to receive this award and the third in Canada. The award recognizes the effective operation and the quantifiable contribution the research park makes to its community. I want to thank the park team and their board of directors. Congratulations to Tom Streifler, Catherine Albion, Ang U, and Carolyn Craig. I recognize your excellence, Sarnia Lambton recognizes your excellence, and now the world recognizes your excellence.
The honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Madam Speaker, today, tomorrow, October 1st, marks the International Day for Seniors. It reminds us to appreciate and sacrifices and the contribution made by the seniors toward the progress of our country. I have personal experience with my 96-year-old father, Sardar Purushottam Singh Sangha. I'm certain same applies to all of us. Summer events were the great opportunities to meet and listen to seniors. During Canada 50 Games held in my riding, I had the honor to present medals to the senior champions aged 50 to 90. What a great inspiration for me. I will cherish it forever. Our seniors are reaching out to us. Let's respond because We owe it to them. Action thy duty, reward not thy concern, as in Bhagavad Gita. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich Sioux.
Madam Speaker, on Monday I introduced my bill to repeal Bill C-51. New Democrats are still saying today what we said from the beginning. Bill C-51 infringes on our civil liberties without doing anything to make us safer. The Minister of Public Safety now calls Bill C-22 the centerpiece of Liberal national security policy. During the campaign, of course, the Liberal centerpiece was fixing Bill C-51. What we have in Bill C-22 is a necessary but flawed review committee, a case of bait and switch followed by more consultation. Yet more consultation is cold comfort to Canadians whose rights are under threat, including those engaged in legitimate dissent like First Nations leaders and environmentalists, or even ordinary citizens who value their privacy. Madam Speaker, we all know what works when it comes to combating terrorism. We need to devote adequate resources to de-radicalization and to traditional intelligence and enforcement work. Neither restricting our rights nor collecting so much information on all of us that we lose focus on the real threats will help keep us safe. That's why it's time to...
The honourable member for York South-Weston.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak about the Canada Summer Jobs Program and the impact that it's had in my riding of York South-Weston. This program is meant to fund organizations to create jobs for young people. Due to the rise in violence in certain parts of Toronto, York South-Weston received extra funding this year from the Canada Summer Jobs Program. This funding was generously matched by Alan and Dawn Carswell and the Carswell Family Foundation. Young people in my riding have come to me and have told me the positive impact that this extra funding has had on their lives. They've told me how they've been able to assist organizations like the Boys and Girls Club of Western Mount Dennis and Frontlines Toronto to deliver even more vital services to my constituents. I'm very proud to be part of a government that invests in young people, that believes in investing in young people, and I'm happy to thank the organizations that participated and Carswell Foundation for ensuring that young people will have meaningful work experience as they start their careers. Thank you.
Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, on August 5th, while millions of Canadians and others around the world watched the opening ceremonies of the Rio Summer Olympic Games, the town of Carlisle, Saskatchewan, and the people of Souris Moose Mountain were focused on 12-year-old Carter Morrison. Carter was born with achondroplasia, an inherited growth disorder, and he was chosen to lead Team Canada into Americana Stadium alongside flag bearer Rosie McLennan. Carter also was fortunate to lead Team Mongolia through the stadium. He carried with him a tree which was later planted following the opening ceremonies. This was the first time ever that children, the Olympic kids, could walk in the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Ronald McDonald House brought nearly 100 people from around the world to Brazil and have been bringing children to the Olympics since 1986. Carter has stayed at Ronald McDonald Houses in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta since he was a baby. Thank you, Ronald McDonald House, and great job, Carter. You were a fantastic ambassador for Canada.
The honourable member for Labrador. The honourable member for Labrador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the steadfast determination of one Indigenous Labradorian. Guy Poole began walking to raise money and awareness for diabetes after his wife passed away due to complications related to the disease. Now 72 years young, committed and energized, Guy has walked over 3,000 kilometers in Newfoundland and Labrador and has raised over $100,000. He most recently finished a walk from Gander to St. John's, Newfoundland. Diabetes is a disease that disproportionately affects First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, up to four times higher in Indigenous communities versus non-Indigenous. That rate is on the rise in both Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations within Canada. I sincerely thank Guy Poole, congratulate him, and acknowledge him and the many others that have worked so hard to raise the awareness and to raise money for prevention, treatment, and a cure for diabetes.
The honourable member for Aurora Oak Ridges.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to inform members that October 2nd marks the 175th anniversary of the Canada Gazette, the Government of Canada's official newspaper. Since 1841, the Gazette has documented proclamations of war and peace, notices of royal assent, regulations, and judicial appointments. La Gazette du Canada.
The Canada Gazette is much more than a means for the government to keep Canadians informed. It's also an important channel of communication for Canadians to speak to their government. The government's draft regulations are clearly posted on the Canada Gazette website, and all Canadians are invited to provide their input.
To the Department of Public Services and Procurement in his role as the Queen's printer, and thank you to the Canada Gazette employees whose efforts contribute to our country's democracy. Thank you.
The honourable member for Airdrie.
Madam Speaker, every year about 1,000 Canadian babies fall asleep and never wake up. They die from sudden infant death syndrome. SIDS is the #1 cause of death in babies under the age of 1. Quinn Isla Cormier of Airdrie was one of those babies. She was loved, and she is still missed. And her death, like all SIDS or undetermined deaths, couldn't have been predicted or prevented. I rise to acknowledge Quinn's mother, Sarah Cormier, and her family for creating an organization dedicated to helping families who've lost an infant suddenly and unexpectedly. Ms. Cormier and Quinn's Legacy Run Society are building awareness through fundraising initiatives and advocacy. And in partnership with SIDS Calgary, the funds raised go to parents who've lost an infant to SIDS and face financial hardship due to the loss of government benefits. Tomorrow marks the beginning of Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, an important reminder of the babies lost and the families that survived them, to help raise awareness and to reflect on whether our current policies are adequately supporting SIDS families.
Honourable member for Laurentides-Labelle.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to an institution inside the Liberal Party of Canada, the aptly named Paul Quirk. As a fresh Liberal volunteer in Ottawa, my first stop on the tour of the party office was the print shop, with Paul at the helm. Never arriving later than sunrise, never shying away from a challenge, the 72-year-old keeps the machinery greased and the wheels turning, rain or shine. He has solved problems, he has given guidance, he has worked miracles. I have learned tricks from him to efficiently stuff envelopes that everyone here would appreciate, and some of you I might tell. Now, at the end of 19 years, 7 national elections, and more than 50 by-elections, with some 119 million pieces produced, Paul is ready to take his next step. We will hold the presses until we hear what his new career will be. Paul, it has been an immense pleasure to work with you and to learn from you. All the very best in your retirement. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House to let you know that tomorrow, October 1st, is National Seniors Day. We believe that Canada is at its best when all citizens are treated fairly and have the opportunity to reach their full potential, including seniors. Through Budget 2016, we are making historic investments that will change the lives of seniors both now and in the future by addressing income security, social inclusion, poverty, affordable housing, as well as more generous and flexible leave for caregivers. Let us take the opportunity on National Seniors Day to celebrate and pay tribute to all seniors for the valuable contributions they have made and continue to make to our families, workplaces, communities, and to Canada. And I would particularly like to take this opportunity to recognize a great organization in my riding of Winnipeg South, Pembina Active Living 55+, which provides valuable programs and community services to older adults. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And today I rise to recognize Orange Shirt Day. And this was launched in the province of British Columbia and was created to educate students and communities of the history and legacy of Canada's residential schools. Madam Speaker, most of us in this chamber remember our first days of school very fondly, our new clothes, our shiny shoes, and we go off with pride. The experience for Phyllis Webster, who was 6 years old when she began attending St. Joseph's Mission School in Williams Lake, was nothing like many experience. On her first day, her new orange shirt, a gift from her grandmother, was taken away from her. This profoundly affected her for many, many years. So today, what we need to do is continue on the important work. We started with an apology in this chamber and continue to recognize the legacy of the residential school. So I hope all members in this chamber will stand and recognize Orange Shirt Day in Canada.
The honourable member for Ajax.
Madam Speaker, for a generation, Canada led the world in tobacco control. Successive Liberal and Conservative governments worked with not-for-profit organizations like Heart and Stroke, Canadian Cancer Society, and the Lung Association to drive down youth prevalence rates and see smoking reduced to some of the lowest levels in the world. And then for a decade, that leadership was lost. And Canada watched as the rest of the world passed us by in tobacco control. We watched as stagnant rates in Canada on smoking continued. And that means that about 37,000 Canadians die every single year in the leading cause of preventable death. To give you an idea of scope, Madam Speaker, that's the equivalent of an entire riding disappearing every 3 years. We have an opportunity to reestablish leadership in areas like plain packaging, where we've seen Australia and the United Kingdom and others take action. We made a commitment there to act, and we know that that will work. It's time for us to lead again.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi Bay James Nunavik.
Speaker, I rise today to recognize Orange Shirt Day because every child matters. I would like to read a letter from an Oji Cree teenager who wrote to me. She wrote, "Dear House of Commons, residential schools have played a huge role in the history of Canada. This needs to be told to every Canadian to bring awareness and honor the survivors of residential schools and their families. September 30th is known as Orange Shirt Day because on this day, an Indigenous woman, Phyllis Webstad, was stripped of her orange shirt on the first day of school. This action symbolizes the way many Indigenous children were stripped of their identity and culture in residential schools. When you destroy a culture, a language, tradition, you demolish the foundation of a human being. Many Indigenous people are still suffering in silence. That is the goal of Orange Shirt Day, Madam Speaker, to bring comfort and closure to the survivors of residential school, to remind them that we support them on their journey to healing. I hope you all take the time to stand with us and bring hope for a better future."
The Honourable Member for Battlefords, Lloydminster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Canada's been a trading nation since before Confederation. Codfish and beaver pelts were traded as a form of currency and paved the way to the development of this great country. Today, we still trade in commodities, but also world-class ideas and services. Free, fair, and open trade corridors are the pathways to economic sustainability. In our cross-Canada hearings over the past month, it's clear that the vast majority of Canadians are open to and ready to take these bold next steps with CETA and TPP. However, there will always be the naysayers who will see the sky as falling. We should never discount their concerns, but rather make sure they are apprised of the real facts, not the myths and misinformation some are peddling. It's well documented that trade drives innovation and efficiency. The Canadian economic future is bright with our resources and Canadian resourcefulness. We are a nation with huge potential. We must embrace these opportunities, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mount Royal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On Sunday evening, Jews in Canada will begin celebrating Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. As such, it is a good time for us to recognize the enormous contributions Canadian Jews have made to our society. Since 1760, the Jewish community has left its mark. In politics, Ezekiel Hart was the first Jew elected to the legislature of Lower Canada in 1807. In 1872, Henry Nathans of Victoria was the first Jew elected to the House of Commons. Since then, they were followed by such luminaries as Herb Gray, David Lewis, Dave Barrett, Joe Oliver, and Erwin Kotler. From Supreme Court justices like Bora Laskin and Rosie Abella, to athletes like Bobby Rosenfeld and Mike Camilleri, to writers like Mordecai Richler and Adele Wiseman, to actors like Seth Rogen and William Shatner, to musicians like Leonard Cohen, Geddy Lee, and Drake. Jewish Canadians continue to make Canada proud. I wish all who celebrate Rosh Hashanah a healthy, peaceful, and sweet New Year. L'Shana Tova.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader, the Honourable House Leader, Official Opposition House Leader.
Madam Speaker, yesterday the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed our worst fears. Compared to under the Conservative watch, the Liberals have increased spending by more than $3 billion, and that was just in the first 3 months of this year. Yet there's nothing to show for this reckless spending. Jobs are being lost across the country. When will the Liberals stop their out-of-control spending and start respecting hard-working taxpayers?
Honourable Secretary Parlementaire.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank the Honourable Member for a question.
Madam Speaker, this is the government that's decided to invest in Canadian and the Canadian economy. And what we're doing, Madam Speaker, has been applauded around the world. Let me quote the managing director of the IMF, Madam Christine Lagarde, which was saying recently, really very much hopes that the Canadian economic policies can actually go viral. Madam Speaker, what we're doing is right for Canadian and is applauded around the world and will continue to do that.
Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, the ordinary Canadian is struggling. The economy has lost over 60,000 jobs just over the summer, and investment is leaving Canada. Household debt is at record levels, yet the Liberal government continues to spend recklessly and increase taxes. Expert after expert confirms that the Liberal spending spree isn't working and isn't helping the economy. When will the Liberals do the right thing, cancel their tax hikes on Canadian families, and control their reckless spending?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. Madam Speaker, actually growth is up in July. I mean, just let's be clear on the facts. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, is that this government has done as its first priority to reduce tax for Canadians, because that's what Canadian families wanted. And after that, we went on to introduce the Canada Child Benefit, Madam Speaker, which is helping 9 families out of 10. Then we went on to enhance the CPP, the Canadian Pension Plan in Canada, Madam Speaker. Then we went on to make historical investment in infrastructure and innovation. Madam Speaker, that's the way to grow an economy, and we'll continue to do just that.
The Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, Canadian businesses are losing confidence in this Liberal government. Absolutely. Less than 48 hours after the Pacific Northwest project was approved, Petronas is rumoured to be selling their stake. Why? Because the cost and uncertainty of doing business in Canada is too high. When will the Liberals stop raising taxes, stop choking businesses with needless red tape and delays?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
To thank my honourable colleague for the question. Let me state the record very clear. The very first thing that this government, Madam Speaker, did was to reduce taxes for 9 million Canadians. That's the first thing we did, Madam Speaker, and we're very proud of it. And you know what? What we're doing, Madam Speaker, is applauded around the world by the IMF Managing Director, by the Governor of Bank of Canada, by the PBO. Madam Speaker, what we're doing is the right thing for Canadians, and we will continue to do just that.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, interfering in provincial jurisdiction is part of the Liberal culture. This centralizing government wants to impose conditions on health care and health transfers for the well-being of Canadians. Madam Speaker, respect for provincial jurisdiction, does that mean something to the Minister of Health? The Honourable Minister of Health. Madam Speaker, Canadians are proud of their public health care system. I hear their concerns, and I want to say that the Canada Health Transfer will increase by over $1 billion next year to reach over $37 billion. I am already in discussions with my counterpart from Quebec and with the other provincial and territorial health ministers. We are continuing our discussions on the way to create a healthcare system that meets the needs of Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, the provinces are the best placed to decide what they need in terms of health care. And on this side of the House, we understand that very well. Madam Speaker, today I'm asking the Minister of Health to remove all conditions for the transfer of for health transfers, and let's have the minister deal with her own affairs and let provinces maintain their own jurisdiction. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Stating that the members opposite, who while they were in power for almost a decade did nothing to advance health care in this country, are now dictating how it should be done. Our government works with a spirit of collaboration with our partners. All levels of government have a role to play in health care. It requires us to work in collaboration with patients, with health care providers, all of us working together for the betterment of the health of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, Bay James Nunavik, EU.
Madam Speaker. Today marks the Orange Shirt Day, a day to honor residential school survivors, Madam Speaker. So let's recognize survivors who are left out of the residential school agreement. For example, the day scholars have a certified class action, and time is of the essence, Madam Speaker, because plaintiffs are passing away. But this government has refused to settle with them in good faith. In honor of Orange Shirt Day, can the Justice Minister finally commit to true reconciliation and stop fighting survivors in court?
The honour of Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his question. The government is committed to ensuring justice for all victims of this dark chapter in our history, and that all those entitled to compensation will receive it. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to pursue the vital work of advancing reconciliation with Indigenous people and bringing closure to the tragic legacy of abuse of Indigenous children. We uphold the Indian residential school settlement process, and we will protect the integrity of that independent assessment process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Abitibi Bay James, Nunavik EU. Madam Speaker, there won't be reconciliation in the absence of justice in this country. We need to stop forcing survivors of Indian residential schools to fight before the courts to get their fair compensation. The Justice Minister must eliminate the cases that are piling up against Indian residential school survivors in her department. On this day in honor of residential school survivors, can the Minister commit to doing just that?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, I thank my colleague for his question. I don't think that there is any doubt of our government's commitment to all the victims that have suffered through this dark saga of residential schools in Canada. Just yesterday, we talked about the settlement out of court of the Anderson case in Newfoundland and Labrador. We are very proud, Mr. Speaker, that our government is moving forward with the truth and reconciliation process. We will continue to work hard to reconcile with Indigenous people and with survivors. Litigation is not our choice or course of action we prefer.
The Honourable Member for Belley-Chambly. Madam Speaker, still on the subject of human rights, yesterday Saudi Arabia refused to recognize its past violations. It also affirmed that arms sales is an act of friendship. Most Canadians, I think we can agree, are in agreement that we don't need to show friendship towards a country which violates human rights. Will the government support the NDP motion to increase oversight of arms sales? If not, why not? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We're delivering on our campaign commitment by acceding to the Arms Trade Treaty in line with our G7 and G20 allies, thus promoting responsibility, transparency and accountability in regulating the global trade of arms. This is the right thing to do, it's what we committed to doing, and we're delivering on our promise. Right now, we're consulting with NGOs and industry before introducing legislation, at which time all members of the House and in committee will have the opportunity to scrutinize and review. I'm
looking forward to working forward with my colleagues on this issue. Thank you. The Member for Belley-Chambly. Madam Speaker, still no convincing argument for why to not support that.
Foreign Affairs quietly approved export permits for Saudi Arabia while claiming his hands were tied. Later, we learned that the minister approved the export contract shortly after a private meeting with the Saudi ambassador. No wonder Saudi Arabia considers this arms deal to be an act of great friendship. But Canadians don't want to be friends with human rights abusers. Is this why the Liberal government is so afraid to support our motion for more transparency? Is this an act of great friendship with Saudi Arabia?
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, this government sticks to its word. We said we would accede to the Arms Trade Treaty, and we are. The NDP, on the other hand, does not stick to its word. So let me quote their leader during the last election. You don't cancel a commercial accord retroactively. It's just not done. And yet now we find that the NDP are willing to abandon almost 3,000 well-paying jobs for hardworking Canadians. We are honouring our promise of jobs for the middle class, and we are honouring our promise to make the arms export process more rigorous and transparent. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Madam Speaker, the people of Alberta have worked hard for generations, and the entire nation has benefited from Alberta's economic strength. But now, unemployed Albertans are struggling to provide for their families. My province is the economic engine of the country, Madam Speaker, and we desperately need this Prime Minister to quit putting up hurdles, raising taxes on the innovators and job creators in my province. When is this government going to recognize the significance a struggling Alberta has on the rest of the country?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, we are very, I would like to thank first the member for the question. We recognize the situation that's going on in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Madam Speaker. And I could say that the first thing we did at this government, which is helping people in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, was to reduce taxes for Canadian, Madam Speaker. And then we went on with the Canada Child Benefit. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, we also reviewed the employment insurance regions to provide more benefits to people there when they lost their job. This is a government that is listening to people and is acting for the people.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Madam Speaker, I want the Minister to know that this isn't just an economic crisis, but a human tragedy as well. Since the beginning of 2015, the unemployment rate has risen from 4.8% to 8.4%, and more than 200,000 Albertans are out of work. Skilled workers across Alberta are struggling. Can the Finance Minister commit to reversing course on his ill-advised plan to raise taxes, spend recklessly, string up red tape before it's too late for Albertans?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Be clear, we are listening to Western Canadians. We are listening to people in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. We understand the situation. And that's why, Madam Speaker, we reduce taxes for Canadians. That's the first bill we passed in this House, was to reduce tax for Canadians and invest in infrastructure, invest in innovation. Those type of investment in the Canadian economy, in the Canadian middle class, are going to make the people of Western Canada and people across this country more prosperous. That's what we promised to do. That's what we're going to be doing, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Madam Speaker, I would invite the government to take its responsibility seriously. Many consultations, many press releases, lots that they're working on, but nothing is moving forward. Madam Speaker, an urgent file is softwood lumber. In just a few days, the agreement will end. And the industry needs to know what's going to happen. It's important for the regions. When will this government go beyond words and conclude an agreement in the interests of Canadian families? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. We are working very hard on this file. Our negotiators are in pretty much constant contact with representatives of the provinces, with workers, with industry across country, and with, obviously, their American counterparts. We are working very hard on this file, but we are looking for a good deal for Canada, for Quebec, and for our workers, but not just any agreement. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Madam Speaker, I would like the negotiators to be working at all times. Over 400,000 jobs are at risk in the country if the agreement isn't signed by October 12th. Over 135 municipalities in Quebec depend exclusively on this agreement. We know that Quebec files don't interest the Prime Minister, so it's a good thing that this is an agreement that concerns the entire country. Madam Speaker, when will the government finally take its responsibilities seriously, respect Canadian workers who don't want to lose their jobs in 2 weeks? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, we are very committed and working hard on this file. The Minister has gone to Saguenay to speak with industry reps and with workers, but listen to what others are saying on our work. The Conseil du Patronat de Québec noted, and I quote, that the attention that we are putting into defending the Quebec industry is excellent. The forestry industry of Quebec is very happy with our position on the Quebec forestry regime. We are listening to Quebec industry. We're listening to workers.
Madam Speaker, the Pacific Northwest LNG project is a $36 billion investment that would create thousands of well-paying jobs and allow Canada to export clean energy to the world. Today, Canadians see the news that the project's proponent is considering selling. In the spring, we warned the Liberals that delaying the rigorous assessment process longer would put the project at risk. While the Liberals held up the approval process, did they know the project's investors were considering getting out?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the party opposite, we understand that the only way resources will get to market in the 21st century is if we can get a balance between the environment and the economy. We did a review. We spent the time necessary. We have conditions that are reasonable, and I can quote from many different people who acknowledge that these are conditions that are normal with any project. They are conditions that are responsible, and really it's up to a proponent to decide, and right now the issue is low commodity prices.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, time is of the essence for LNG, but the Liberals added barriers to the process at the worst possible time. The Pacific Northwest LNG project is supported by the vast majority of local First Nations, the City of Fort St. John, the BC Chambers of Commerce, and the Government of BC. It's important to all of Canada. Approval is one thing, getting it built is another. Are the Liberals working with the proponents to ensure none of the conditions are permanent roadblocks so the project can get started and Canadians can get back to work?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We believe in rigorous environmental assessments, and we believe that what we've done is pave the way for the project to go ahead in a sustainable way. Once again, it's up to a proponent to determine if the economic conditions are there to go ahead. I can read from a number of different people, including the CEO of the Business Council of British Columbia. This decision paves the way for Canada to compete in the international LNG market while continuing our climate leadership on a global scale. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rimouski-Neigette-Témiscouata-Lévesque. When the Liberals took power, they told us that it was the end of one-sided dialogues with the provinces. But if we look at what's happening in the negotiations concerning the health transfer, it's clear that, well, nothing's really changed. According to the health minister from Quebec, the government's approach is a trap, and how the Liberals are trying to sugarcoat things, but they're offering the provinces the same $36 billion health transfer cut as the Conservatives. Can the minister explain the difference between the cuts in health care from the Conservatives and the Liberal cuts? The Honourable Minister of Health. Madam Speaker, what is different is that our government is working very hard with the provinces and territories. We have had very good discussions with our counterparts across the country. Yesterday I spoke with Quebec's health minister and with the health minister from Ontario. We will continue to work hard, and I will remind you that the Canada Health transfers will increase, will go up by over $1 billion next year to reach over $37 billion. Thank you.
Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Health called her cut to the healthcare escalator reasonable. But Liberals used different adjectives when this cut was first announced by Stephen Harper. The member for Vancouver Centre, who was the Liberal health critic, said it was walking away from Medicare. The member for St. Paul's, now a Liberal cabinet minister, said it would leave Canadians out in the cold. And the member for Ottawa South called the Conservatives' approach unconscionable and indefensible. How does the minister explain this blatant, undeniable reversal to Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is interested in collaborating with all of our partners across the country. I will remind the member opposite to clarify something that he said yesterday. He talked about healthcare spending increasing, but in fact, according to the Canadian Institute for Health Information, across this country, annual healthcare spending has declined by an average of 0.6% since 2011. That is in the context of the Canadian Health Transfer increasing by 6%. We are going to increase it next year. There will be more than $1 billion extra added to the Canada Health Transfer. In addition to that, there will be new investments in areas important to Canadians.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Madam Speaker, last fall the minister disclosed he had a personal relationship with the Irvings. The Ethics Commissioner has banned him from any dealings with the Irvings. Apparently, he doesn't think it applies to cocktails with Irving lawyers and lobbyists. Given that he's in charge of all litigation involving the federal government, could the minister tell us how many ongoing cases the federal government has with Irving or with Cox and Palmer?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, you know very well and that Canadians expect a high standard of ethics from our ministers and our government. So I would invite the members of the opposition to look at a document that was tabled in the House today which says clearly that the minister's participation in this event is not a problem. The minister asked the Ethics Commissioner whether this invitation was acceptable. And, Madam Speaker, the answer was very clear. There is no problem with the minister attending this event.
Honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ministers of Fisheries recently stated law firms are not able to confirm whether any person or client or company is a client, as such matters are confidential. An easy Google search revealed Cox & Palmer represents the Irvings. Yeah. When did the minister request a ruling from the Ethics Commissioner? And at that time, did he disclose that Cox & Palmer represents the Irvings?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, once again, I will refer the opposition members to the document that was tabled in the House, Madam Speaker, which indicates very, very clearly that the minister can attend this event, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, this is an annual event organized by a law firm to allowing Atlantic business leaders to meet with Toronto business leaders. The minister does not have any access to the clients of this law firm, and the law firm will not make those public. So once again, Madam Speaker, the minister has the permission of the Ethics Commissioner to attend this event.
Madam Speaker, moments ago, the Liberal House leader tabled only one email of a string of several between the Fisheries Minister and the Ethics Commissioner concerning his attendance at a law firm representing the Irvings. Madam Speaker, when will the Liberals table all emails and all documents between the Minister and the Commissioner? When will they tell this House the truth? And what, Madam Speaker, is the Minister hiding?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, once again, I would invite the member from the opposition to look at the document that was tabled in the House today, which says very clearly from the Ethics Commissioner that the minister was fully cleared to participate in this event. And do the members from across the way question the work of the Ethics Commissioner, Madam Speaker, who gave authorization to the minister to participate in this event? The minister, Madam Speaker, will always participate in events where he can promote the interests of Atlantic Canada, Madam Speaker, and the interests of all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries confirmed that he will be the guest of honour at a cocktail organised by a law firm that deals with the Irving family. Yes, the Minister communicated with the Ethics Commissioner, but we've learned from the media that the Minister provided some information, but did he give all the information, and did he say that the law firm represents the Irving family? We will never question the work of the Ethics Commissioner, but we can question what the Minister has said to the Ethics Commissioner. So did the Minister tell the Ethics Commissioner that this was organized by a group that represents the Irvings? Madam Speaker, I will repeat this, and it's important to repeat it. The Ethics Commissioner gave her approval for the Minister to participate in this event.
About ethics, Madame la Présidente. The interim Conservative leader charged taxpayer nearly $10,000 to stay in Ottawa while she was living in an official residence, also paid for by the public. Recourse from the House of Commons. So if they have a letter or document stating this, Madam Speaker, I would love to see it, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker, the Environment Minister told CBC that she approved Pacific Northwest LNG project because measures will be taken to protect salmon spawning areas. The trouble is, these salmon don't spawn at the mouth of the river. What is actually threatened are juvenile salmon in what DFO has called one of the largest and most diverse wild salmon watersheds in the world. How can Canadians have confidence that the minister's measures will actually protect the environment and our salmon when she doesn't even know where salmon spawn?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Our government makes decisions based on science and evidence, and we rely on our experts across government who have been working on this file for the past 3 years. I apologize if I misspoke, but the reality is we rely on our experts, public servants, who are scientists, to make decisions, and the 190 responsible conditions were based on that science. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the Environment Minister was standing up for the environment instead of paving the way for development, we'd all feel better. On Wednesday, the Union of BC Municipalities passed 2 resolutions calling on this government to deal with improved oil spill response in the marine environment. but the Liberals seem to be in favour of tanker increases that will further threaten those coasts. So this is, we've got a continued legacy of serious gaps in our oil spill response capacity. Local governments are alarmed, our local coastal environments and economy are at risk, and I want to know what this government will do.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for her question. And Canada is, of course, very much focused on improving marine safety in our country. In fact, it was part of my mandate letter. I have been working with my colleagues from fisheries, from the environment, and from other portfolios to make sure that we in Canada will not only have proper marine safety measures put in place, but that we will improve our capability to respond to spills on all of our 3 coasts. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mount Royal. Madam Speaker.
Organization, the UN agency responsible for aviation, has its head office in Montreal, a source of pride to all Montrealers. Depuis le 27 septembre.
Since September 27th, the Triennial General Assembly has been underway in Montreal. Can the Minister of Transport elaborate on the discussions that are being held there on greenhouse gas emissions and the role our government is playing in this crucial area? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Thank you, Madam, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Mount Royal for his question. The Government of Canada has been proposing concrete measures to reduce or mitigate greenhouse gases stemming from international aviation. We're proud of our role. In fact, I was there for the opening of the General Assembly of the ICAO. I made a speech and I met my international counterparts. We believe that it's extremely important for all countries, over 100 countries, to reach an agreement to mitigate greenhouse gases, and Canada is playing a major role in that area. Thank you.
A year ago, Ottawa's regional minister slammed on the brakes on plans for a new civic hospital in her own riding because, we were told, hospital construction would interfere with valuable climate change research. Yet a report posted on the Environment Commissioner's website confirms that all the research happening on the land will be done at least 5 years before shovels even go in the ground for the new hospital. Did the Member of Parliament for the area and the Environment Minister read this information before she decided to block the construction of a hospital in her own riding for at least a year?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
President, we are committed to a state-of-the-art hospital centrally located in Ottawa, and we understand the need from the community to make a decision quickly. Unlike the past government, this important decision cannot be taken behind closed doors, and we really believe in a transparent and rigorous process, and this is why I asked the NCC to lead a site review process. And I understand that the people in Ottawa are getting involved in this important public consultation process, and I'm confident in the NCC's ability to lead a thorough study in order to provide the government with—
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, Madam Speaker, my question was for Ottawa's regional minister, not Montreal's. The member for Ottawa Centre is the one who triumphantly announced a year ago that she was reversing John Baird's decision to grant farmland to the hospital. When she later learned that there was nowhere else to put it, she went into hiding and punted the matter to the minister for Montreal. Now our city is voiceless on a hospital in our city. When will this minister take responsibility for her community and our city and let us build a new hospital?
Madam Speaker, I'm very happy to be in charge of the National Capital Commission, the NCC, in order to make sure that Ottawa has a centrally located state-of-the-art hospital. And unlike the past government, we really believe that this decision-making shouldn't be taken behind closed doors. So that's why I won't take any recommendations or any lessons coming from my counterpart, and we'll make sure that we invest in an important NCC thorough study, and I look forward to getting all the recommendations.
I just want to remind the members that when someone has the floor, that they are to listen, and then they'll have an opportunity to ask questions at a later time. The honourable member for Banff Airdrie.
Well, the government claims it's consulting on fundamental changes to our democracy, but then they're not actually listening to what Canadians have to say. So let's listen. Constituents Jeff and Annie wrote, "This is not a decision for only political parties to make." And Charles and Wainata wrote, "It is unconscionable that a government in power would try to rig an election system to stay in power. This is what dictators do." And Dennis says a referendum is essential. So will the Liberals finally agree to let each and every Canadian have a say in a referendum?
I know for Jeff and Annie and Dennis, we appreciate that feedback, but they would also like to have opportunities to be able to speak to their MPs. On this side of the House, we've had more than 150 members of Parliament who either have had or will have consultations in their riding on this issue. The Conservatives have 5. Now, that's a lot better than the 0 they had on the Unfair Elections Act, I'll grant them that. But when are they going to let their constituents have their say on this issue, actually consult their constituents, and participate in the process of improving our democracy?
Very good.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Well, Mr. Speaker, last Saturday I hosted an open house on electoral reform to hear what Canadians have to say. And wait, Madam Speaker, let me tell you the results. After tabulating the responses at my town hall, there was a clear majority who want a referendum, and over 800 people in my riding have now petitioned to have a vote before any change in electing MPs is implemented. So, will the Prime Minister listen to their demands and stop denying them their right to have a vote on a referendum?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm glad the member opposite took the opportunity to have that session. I encourage all members of this House to do it. In fact, most from all the other parties, with the except the official opposition, have taken that opportunity. What I would say is there's an excellent starting point for conversation, and that is the critic for the Conservative Party on democratic reform has said that first past the post is not the best system. And so has the critic for every other party, and so have we. So why don't we focus on proposing the best possible alternative, on working together and having those consultations so that we can move forward in the best way possible to improve our democracy.
Member for Elmwood Transcona.
This week is Right to Know Week, but every day that goes by without a duty to document the discussions and decisions in ministers' offices is an affront to Canadians' right to know. The Liberal government has so far not dealt with the issue of ministerial emails being deleted. The Information Commissioner has recently called for the Auditor General to look into the practice, and we're wondering when the Liberal government is going to make it clear to Canadians what they're deciding to keep and what they're deciding just to delete, Madam Speaker, and when they're going to bring in rules to require proper documentation. After all, Canadians have a right to know, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Official House Leader.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question and the opportunity to rise in this House to remind all members and to remind Canadians that we campaigned on a commitment to have a more open, more transparent, more relevant government for Canadians, and we will continue to do the good work that we are doing, and I look forward to working with the member opposite with any feedback that he has. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Hyacinthe Bagot. Madam Speaker, the St. Hyacinthe Courier has been around since 1853. It's the oldest French newspaper in the Americas, and it's a member of the Coalition for the Survival of Print News Media in Quebec. There's a broad consensus among major newspapers in Quebec and Canada that concrete programs are needed to provide support for the transition towards digital. What's the Minister of Innovation's timetable for implementing concrete support for newspapers and print news media? The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recognize that currently our various news media are facing major challenges when it comes to digitization. And we are aware of the important role of media, and that's why we've taken leadership in the area of media. We're studying the question, we're conducting public consultations, and I hope that all media in Canada and in Quebec specifically will participate in those consultations on October 28th in Montreal. I would encourage everyone to participate.
Liberal MPs from Hamilton, Kitchener and Vancouver have all come out in support of Jetline's proposal because it will benefit the traveller. The Minister of Transport likes to tell us that he's doing his homework on this file. At the rate he's going, he will have handed in his homework long after the school year is over. He won't even get a grade for his work. Will the minister make a decision and get jetlines in the air?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Of course, I always do my homework, and I do it thoroughly. It's been a principle all my life. Now, I want to say that we are looking very seriously at the recommendations of the Canada Transportation Act review, which brings in the question of foreign ownership, and that is certainly very germane to the requests that have come from both Jetlines and Enerjet. We are looking at this very diligently as part of my homework, and our decisions will be based on what is in the best interest of Canadians. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Well, Madam Speaker, Waterloo International Airport wants the Liberals to raise the foreign ownership limit of airlines to 49%. This will allow low-cost airlines to start up in Canada and to create thousands of jobs. The minister said a decision was not forthcoming, but in the House last week, his parliamentary secretary said that there would be a decision in the coming months. This uncertainty is unacceptable. We need action now. Why is the minister not listening to Canadians who want low-cost air carriers and more jobs?
L'Honorable Ministre des Transports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did not say is not forthcoming. Sometimes the media decide to frame it that way. I am working very diligently, as I've said, for a long time to make sure that we make an informed decision. In fact, I have held roundtables for the past 4.5 months. I have consulted with Canadians. I've even had a Facebook chat live and talk to Canadians about their views with respect to improving the traveller experience. Believe me, I'm working on this. I'm doing my homework. I am consulting Canadians, and we'll make a decision in the best interest of Canadians.
Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, Liberals are spending billions on pet projects, yet no jobs for Saskatchewan. They claim to an increase in so-called infrastructure, yet no jobs for Saskatchewan. Now the Liberals want to force a carbon tax on the provinces. That will kill more jobs for Saskatchewan. Forcing the provinces and the territories to adopt carbon taxes will cost families thousands of dollars. When will this minister stop taxing hard-working Canadians and end their job-killing carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. We are very pleased that we are going to be moving forward with the Pan-Canadian Climate Plan that was agreed to by the provinces and the territories in the Vancouver Declaration, which also included recognition of the importance of putting a price on carbon. I'm very excited about the debate that is going to take place next week on the Paris Agreement. I'm also very looking forward to meeting with my counterparts, environment ministers, this coming Monday to talk about our Pan-Canadian Plan, including how we're going to price pollution.
The Honourable Member for Fleetwood-Port Kells.
Madam Speaker, Canadians only need to turn on the news to see the devastating effect that the misuse of fentanyl is having in our communities. My home province of British Columbia has already declared a public health emergency after a dramatic increase in the number of overdose deaths from illicit drugs such as fentanyl, and 800 are projected to die due to overdose in BC by the end of the year. But this is an issue affecting all provinces and territories, and we need to act. Will the Minister of Health inform this House what our government is doing to combat the opioid crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, the member from Fleetwood-Port Kells has raised a very serious matter. We are deeply concerned about the growing number of overdoses and deaths caused by fentanyl and other opioids. That is why we have delivered a 5-point action plan to address the opioid crisis in this country. It includes work done in collaboration with our partners, including Senator Vern White. We were able to take a step in August to restrict chemicals used in the illicit production of fentanyl. We have much more work to do in collaboration with health professionals, addiction experts, provinces and territories, and all members of all parties to implement the
Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Madam Speaker, this summer, the government abruptly and without consultation added significant new study permit requirements for those wishing to complete language courses in Canada before entering a degree program. This added red tape is dulling Canada's competitive edge in attracting international students, and decreased fall enrollment in language institutes already is reflecting this. Can the minister tell the numerous educational groups and institutes that have urgently contacted many of us across party lines? I'm sure my colleagues in the government have even even had these calls, when he is going to talk to them about their concerns, when he's going to address their concerns, more importantly.
The Honourable Minister of Citizenship.
Well, I can say, Madam Speaker, that we are addressing this issue of these conservative imposed rules, which are causing some trouble, and I'm hoping to have a response in September. But I can also say on the international students, we want to court international students. We have reversed their provision to take away the 50% credit for citizenship, and we are adding points for international students on express entry. So, Madam Speaker, we Liberals are working for international students and reversing what these people did.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Madam Speaker, this summer, Canadians all across the country were glued to their TVs watching our athletes shine at the Rio Olympics. My question is to the Parliamentary Secretary for Sport and Persons with Disabilities.
That the Rio Games are sadly over, can the Parliamentary Secretary advise this House just how well Canada's Olympic and Paralympic teams performed?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Madame la Présidente, j'aimerais remercier.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Châteauguay-Lacolle for her excellent question. I had the opportunity to watch the Olympics and the Paralympics in Rio. Our athletes made us proud, to say the least. The Paralympic team came 14th and the Olympic team came 10th. Both exceeded expectations.
All Canadians, I thank our athletes for their hard work, perseverance, and courage. This past summer, you gave us memories of a lifetime.
Excellent.
The honourable member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
Madam Speaker, on June 21st, there was a screening of the documentary The Angry Inuk, held here in Parliament Hill. Produced by a prominent Inuit filmmaker, this documentary covers the struggles of the Inuit seal hunter, who have seen the cost of their seal products crash due to the EU product ban. And pelts now go for half of what they once did. When will this government take action to combat the EU seal ban, which is devastating Inuit hunters?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to speak to this particular issue. Being an Inuk myself and living in the north, we know how critical the sealing industry is to our communities and to our people. We continue to work hard as a government, and we continue to work hard with Inuit people to open new markets around the world. It's a very humane industry. It's one that we take a lot of pride in. It's a long-standing part of our culture. And as we speak today, there's a delegation from Nunavut that is in the UK marketing and promoting seal products from Canada.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, the Immigration Minister didn't answer my question last week about refugees from Haiti and Zimbabwe who have still had no news on their applications for permanent residence. Over 1,000 refugees have been living with uncertainty for years with no status, often in dire straits without work permits, Medicare, banking services, or even phone service. Will the minister undertake to take special steps to process these applications and give these refugees their permanent residence ASAP? The Honourable Minister, we've already worked very hard on this file. We had a press conference with my Quebec counterpart and the member for Bourassa. We're going to simplify the process, and we've offered low-interest loans, and the member for Bourassa spoke at a church in Creole and on the radio. We've made so many efforts to support the Haitian community already. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Madam Speaker, after adopting the Conservatives' greenhouse gas reduction targets, the Liberals are now adopting their projects. The same minister who stressed the urgency of fighting climate change in Paris has now approved the PNW pipeline. She's condoning the production of 6 to 9 million tons more GHGs per year. Can somebody please explain to me, Madam Speaker, how they think they can reduce emissions by increasing them? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. Our government knows that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. We're working very hard on all fronts. I'm very happy that next week we'll have the opportunity to have a discussion about the Paris Agreement. I hope my colleague opposite will be able to participate in the dialogue. On Monday, I'll be meeting my counterparts from the provinces and territories, and we hope to move forward with our Canada-wide plan. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. A disc sounded the alarm yesterday. Quebec's music industry is in crisis. For example, Jean Leloup received a little less than $30 for 500,000 streamings of his song Paradise City on Spotify. What was the Heritage Minister's reaction? She sympathizes. The house is on fire and the firefighter just stands there shaking her head. Quebec's artists need concrete steps taken fast, not months of consultations. When is the minister going to step in and support Quebec culture? What's she waiting for? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her important question. I am taking action because we took leadership on the issue of understanding the impact of digitization on media and music. So we're listening to all the stakeholders, and we've agreed on a consultation process. I truly hope that the parties opposite will take part in late October in Montreal in those conversations. This is an issue that affects Canadians.
Would like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Glenn Abernethy, Minister of Health and Social Services, Minister responsible for seniors, for persons with disabilities, for Workers' Safety and Compensation Commission, and for the Public Utilities Board for Northwest Territories. Tabling of documents. Introductions of government bills. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente, au nom du ministre des Affaires étrangères.
On behalf of the Minister.
Members, that the House is continuing with this business. Could you please leave the chamber to allow the business to continue? Thank you very much. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and pursuant to Standing Order 32.2, it's my honour to table in both official languages the final act of the International Telecommunications Union document from November 27th, 2015, and the explanatory notes accompanying this document.
Thank you. And that was under tabling of documents. I don't think that it was understood a while ago. So introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committees. Introduction of private members' bills. Mr. Fraser, West Nova, seconded by Mr. McKinnon from Gatineau, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Holidays Act, Remembrance Day. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for West Nova.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am honoured to rise today to introduce my private member's bill, An Act to Amend the Holidays Act, Remembrance Day. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Gatineau for being the seconder on the bill. Similar versions of this bill have been introduced by former members of Parliament from the NDP, the Conservatives and Liberals, including in the 41st Parliament where it received nearly unanimous support on a vote at second reading. Every year on November 11th, ceremonies are held across Canada to remember those men and women who have made the supreme sacrifice for our country. We have the privilege of living in a free and democratic country thanks to the valour of those brave Canadians who fought to protect our rights and freedoms. It is with a deep respect for members of the Canadian Forces and our veterans that I put forward this bill, officially recognizing November 11th as a solemn day of remembrance by including it as a federal legal holiday. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Fraser, West Nova, seconded by Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. Motion. Presenting petitions. The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Madam Speaker, I'm presenting 10 petitions today in support of a law protecting pregnant women and their preborn children. This week, I received an email that put into words the very essence of why C-225 is resonating and reflecting the hearts and minds of Canadians. The email contains 3 letters addressed to their MP, the Minister of Justice, and the Prime Minister, and I'm posting them on my MP Facebook page for all to read. Now, I don't expect all my fellow parliamentarians to like my page, but I would encourage them to go there and read the views of 3 of my amazing grandchildren, 9 of them altogether, on what they would have felt if their mom and baby brother, whose birth was a highly anticipated event, had been attacked the way Cassie was when she was carrying Molly. When they learned they weren't old enough to sign this petition, they decided to petition their friends anyways. And there's a petition mailed to me with the heading Kids Petition and all 15 signatures in their choice of a colored pencil crayon. Madam Speaker, sometimes it is out of the mouths of children that true wisdom comes.
Okay, presenting petitions, the honourable member for Calgary Signal Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I present a petition today from hundreds of Calgarians who are publicly calling for an end to the persecution of Falun Gong in China.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Peace River West Lot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to present a petition signed by Canadians from Coaldale, Alberta. The petitioners are concerned about the accessibility and impact of violent and degrading sexual explicit material online and the impact to public health, especially on the well-being of women and girls. As such, these petitioners are calling on the House of Commons to adopt my motion M47. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request all the questions to be allowed to stand.
Orders of the day.
Government Orders, Government Bills, Commons, resuming debate at second reading stage of Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and to make consequential amendments to certain acts.
Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Speaker, I am pleased to stand here today in the House to discuss Bill C-22, National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliament Act. I stand here after reading hours of previous debate from this Parliament, as well as previous Parliaments, media reviews of this bill, as well as the bill itself. The bill is extremely misleading and should have a disclaimer that states, read the small print. This bill is truly deceiving Canadians. This government is deceiving Canadians by introducing a bill that does not provide true parliamentary oversight, but is a facade that they are doing something. It was just a year ago that many members of this House sat through electoral debates. It was during this time that the current Prime Minister campaigned on real change and less power of the PMO. Yet, in this bill, this Prime Minister has even greater powers that we can even imagine when they come to the actual inner workings of this committee. Let's start by pointing out that the Prime Minister personally chooses the chair of the committee, and he chose that member and provided a handsome bonus for this position. Let's point out that the makeup of this committee is not like one of the standing committees in the House of Commons. These committee members are approved by the Prime Minister. This committee will only be able to receive information approved by the Prime Minister and his cabinet. This committee reports directly to the Prime Minister, and the report that will be tabled in Parliament must be vetted by the Prime Minister. And let us not forget the Prime Minister has the right to edit this report. I truly think I see a theme in these things that I'm stating. Now, on another note, this committee is made up of parliamentarians that does not require any experience in security, policing, or defence. I ask, am I wrong for thinking that a hand-chosen committee with political imbalance is right for Canada? I would like to point out that the information that can be reviewed by the Parliamentarian Committee has already been cleansed by Cabinet and the Prime Minister. Information that will be reviewed by this committee has been approved, yet restricted. I share with you a section of a speech given by the Honourable Member from Durham, citing former Speaker Peter Milliken, and I quote, "The insinuation that members of Parliament cannot be trusted with the very information that many well require to act on behalf of Canadians runs contrary to the inherent trust that Canadians have placed in their elected officials and which members require to act in their various parliamentary capacities." End quote. This legislation does exactly opposite of the statement by the former and reputable Speaker. We all understand that there would be sensitive information presented to this committee, but the fact that this committee is not seen to have this privilege is very disturbing. My thoughts on this committee can be compared to a family dinner. The committee is not old enough, and not wise enough to sit at the grown-ups table. As well, how can there be true oversight if this information received is already edited? Is it sort of like reading a letter that is black marker all over it, with the that the black marker all over it, and except this case, it is done all by the Prime Minister's office. But I am unsure if this committee would even know that there is edited information that they're receiving, so that when it comes to them, it's already been edited, so therefore they will not have all points of view, and they will not have the opportunity to look at all of the information that is necessary to make the appropriate decisions. I say that because there has been little information provided on this actual committee, just the limitations that they are given. This government is introducing a committee to be more transparent to Canadians, they say. But we know that transparency is truly not the case here. I speak to you as an average Canadian with the honour of representing the great constituents of Elgin, Middlesex, London. An average Canadian who hopes that this government will recognise this flawed bill and make important amendments. Amendment requests that were presented to the Minister of Public Safety and completely ignored. Amendments that were not only reviewed by the official opposition, but were shared with the NDP's critic for their input as well. These suggestions include a set of number of members and senators, the ability for the committee to summon any witness required, the election of the chair, the request that all parties should have the right to select members who would have the necessary experience and familiar with security, intelligence, and defence issues, as well as become a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council and swear an oath of secrecy for the work conducted. These are just some of the suggestions presented to the Minister, and I have stated, with no response. Now, changing gears, I have reviewed numerous suggestions indicating some sort of support for this bill. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association supports the introduction of this bill. However, they note that there's many considerations that need to be addressed. These include the government's power to halt a committee investigation, the Prime Minister's power to redact the committee's report, as well as the decision for the Prime Minister to personally appoint the chair. A law professor at Ottawa University, Craig Forces, has stated he has, and I quote, concerns about the government's ability to veto the committee's plans, limit its abilities to seize secret materials, and redact its report, end quote. An Ottawa University's historian states that this is a good bill, but he too adds that I have, and I quote, the real test will be finding the right members, end quote. Even when people are looking at this bill and who actually supports this bill, they too have questions. We have seen from academics, we have seen from lawyers, we have seen from many people who are reacting to this bill saying it is just not right. It needs to have amendments to it. It needs to have the suggestions from the opposition parties as well. So this bill is not perfect, and therefore I urge the Minister of Public Safety to start looking at these suggestions and start listening to the opposition members. I'm not saying that my colleagues and I are not saying that the third-party oversight is not important, but we see a government setting up a new branch of the PMO, not a committee that is allowed to do its job. Currently, there are watchdogs in place, including the Security Intelligence Review Committee that reviews CSIS, the CSE Commissioner that reviews the Communication Security Establishment, and the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission that reviews the RCMP. This is a committee that is not and will not have the tools and resources available to be effective. This committee already has limitations set out by this Liberal government. This committee is already hampered by this government's decision on the development of the Parliamentarian Committee. I ask my colleagues to review this piece of legislation and proposals for this committee and ask you whether this is what Canadians are really looking for. Did they ask for the committee that is another branch of the Prime Minister's office, or did they ask for third-party oversight? Did they ask for hand-picked members, including a hand-picked chair that reports to the Prime Minister directly? Or do they want to see a committee that truly has the rights of a committee and can do the work with all resources available to them? This legislation is very worrisome to me. If the Prime Minister is hand-picking, then can we be sure that he is not also setting the agenda? Can we be sure that the agenda is allowed to be scrutinized by members, ministers, and then the Prime Minister himself? Or is this committee just fluff? I'm not against watchdogs and whistleblowers. This legislation is not that at all. This legislation does not provide the true parliamentary oversight that is necessary. This committee is a window dressing, and it does not have the teeth to be able to do anything. This committee reports to one person and one person alone, and that person is the Prime Minister of Canada. And it is he that will decide what is actually tabled in this House. National security is extremely important, and the Prime Minister is not allowing the committee to do its work. I urge the Minister of Public Safety to scrutinize this bill and provide something to Parliament that is meaningful. I urge this Minister to work with all members, government and opposition, to do what is best for all Canadians. Please work with the recommendations made by former security lawyers, our armed forces members, and former RCMP and police officials who now sit in this House to make this a better piece of legislation that we all can support. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? L'honorable député.
Honourable member for Laurentide. Labelle.
Excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A quick question for my colleague on her speech. We hear constantly about the concern by the Conservatives about the ability to vet reports for classified information. Mr. Speaker, it's a simple question. Does the member believe that classified information should be releasable, or should there be some kind of mechanism to make sure it never happens? Thank you, Mr.
Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
And thank you very much. I very much appreciate that question, because truly the security of all Canadians and protecting Canadians is paramount here. So I respect what you're saying, but we also see that it is in the hands of one individual. I am recommending that this committee, when sworn to the Privy Council, would have the right so that that information remains with them. They need to be able to make a proper decision, and the only way by doing so is having the accurate and the resources that are necessary. If they are properly supposed to be able to do their job, whether it's going to be from something from the public or something from ministers, they need all the resources. They just do not need things that are picked and chosen by the minister and his cabinet.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Perth, Wellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague from Elgin, Middlesex, London, for her very well-spoken speech and important issues that she raised. I was wondering if she might comment on the fact that the chair of the subcommittee was appointed before legislation was even tabled in this House. The fact that he was appointed back in January, here we are in September, only now debating the creation of this committee, and yet the Prime Minister saw fit to give him a $42,000 pay raise before the committee was even established. I wonder if you might have some comments on that.
Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
I would really like to thank the member from Perth Wellington for asking that, because that is something that Canadians do need to know. This is not the way parliamentary committees work. Parliamentary committees are able to vote the chair, and that is something that's very, very important. We need proper leadership. What we saw here was the Prime Minister who chose and handpicked that person. He as well gave, I think, a $42,000 or $43,000 bonus just to be sitting as the chair for this. That is of great concern to me because, first of all, we need to be sure that this chair, and maybe he had vetted him, but I do not see that because it's very outside of the normal protocol when selecting committees. Does he have the experience with security, policing, intelligence? Does this member that's going to be chairing this committee, does he have all the proper resources to him? And as you said, the number one thing, or as the member said, the number one thing is this member who is going to be chairing this committee was personally selected by the Prime Minister. That is that is unparliamentary.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And since the three Liberal MPs who are actually in the House right now don't seem to be asking questions, I'll ask another question. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I regret I should not have called the attention of the House to being absent.
I just want to remind the honourable members in the House that we're not allowed to, or we're not to refer to anyone's presence in the House.
Certainly, my mistake, Mr. Speaker. I should have known better. But I would like to ask my colleague from Elgin, Middlesex, London. The Liberal government seems to be implying that we are somehow taking this from our international examples, but yet when you compare it to the British example, we're simply falling short on that example. This committee is not reporting directly to the House as it ought to be. I wonder if she might have some comments on the way this has been structured.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
And thank you very much. When doing the research on this committee, I believe all of us probably did look to see what they do in the other houses, things like New Zealand and Australia, as well as of Great Britain. And exactly what this member is stating, it is not the same sort of parliamentary committee that is made up in those other houses. So we personally have handpicked committees, where in other ones, just like he had indicated, just like the member indicated, this is a committee similar to a standing committee in this House. They have the rights of the committee members and they have the resources. So the problem is we cannot compare apples to oranges. This government is indicating that it's just the same idea and they're using those references, but unfortunately they're going down a totally different route than what they've seen. And another thing, when we talk about the selection of the chair, we hear many times, oh, the Conservatives are against this. It's not just the Conservatives against this. We actually see groups that are out there in the community that usually do not support the Conservative movement that are actually saying this is not a good piece of legislation.
Reprise du débat, l'honorable.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you. It's very clear that given some of the reports that we've seen on Radio Can this week and last week on the incredible abuses that have been perpetrated on Canadian citizens by our four agencies, well, there are questions that need to be asked, and that's why I am very happy to rise today to speak at second reading on Bill C-22. This is a file that my excellent colleague, the member from Victoria, has been leading our work with great intelligence. I'll be voting in favor of this bill at the current stage for study at committee, because it's at committee that the real work is done for all Quebecers and Canadians. Certainly we can salute the initiative of this government with this bill. Not only does it meet a very specific need that has been raised by a number of inquiries over decades, but also it addresses a number of recent issues and electoral promises that were made last fall. This bill to create a parliamentary committee on national security and intelligence agencies is crucial, and the committee must be made up it must be put together not only with great care, but also it must have the necessary tools to be credible in the eyes of all Canadians and internationally. Half measures are not an option. Mr. Speaker, in terms of credibility and legitimacy when it comes to national security, the truth is that the previous Conservative government completely missed the mark with Bill C-51 in the previous Parliament. We went 100% in the wrong direction. A critical mass of experts in national security opposed this bill, which was passed very quickly. The NDP was the only party that stood up against this bill, and Canadians rejected this intrusive approach, which lacked balance between protecting national security and protecting the freedoms of Quebecers and Canadians. Let's be clear, the Liberals need to keep their promise to cancel the problematic provisions in C-51. If we as parliamentarians, and if they as a government wish to earn the trust of Quebecers and Canadians, this first step is a bare minimum. And honestly, the public trust in our institutions should be the main goal when it comes to our public security policies in Canada. Let me explain. We live in a world that is constantly changing, and unfortunately, as we've seen with the tragic events in Istanbul, London, New York, Paris, Brussels, and I mean the length of this list should be enough to illustrate my point, Mr. Speaker. The world is unpredictable, and unfortunately, it's very dangerous. We need to ensure that our national security organizations like the RCMP, CSE, and CSIS have the tools and the resources that they need to do their work. But we also need to ensure that they don't offer in such secrecy that Canadians are... We need to ensure that people know that they're effective and that they're protecting Canadians' rights. The world we live in today isn't a John le Carré or an Ian Fleming novel from the Cold War. We need to protect ourselves, but there's also responsibility that comes along with that. I know that our organizations, our national security organizations, already have oversight bodies, but that oversight is not always comprehensive. The review and oversight body's mandates is limited to examining the work done by their own organizations, and there's no way to take an overall look. I'll remind you, Mr. Speaker, that CSIS, RCMP, and CSE have together an annual budget of over $4 billion. And this responsibility and this not negligible amount of money paid by taxpayers justifies the creation of this parliamentary committee. Every member in this House represents, and I'm sure in an admirable way, their citizens. And it's with that in mind that these members will, who become members of this parliamentary committee, will work in their oversight role. But this committee must be put together properly. All of our international security allies have parliamentary committees that are similar to this one. However, their composition and their mandates are sometimes different. We can learn from their experience and the problems with their committees to ensure that our committee is the best it can be. Quebecers and Canadians want a watchdog with sharp teeth. And the new committee needs to have full access to classified information. It needs to have sufficient resources. It needs to have a certain level of autonomy. And when reasonable, it must be able to make sure that Canadians are made aware of its findings in a transparent way. 12 years ago, an interim committee of parliamentarians on national security recommended that if a similar committee were to be put in place permanently, that committee should have full access to all the information that it needs. Certainly in the NDP, we'll fight to ensure that this new committee has that access. I would quote Kent Roach and Craig Forsisi, legal experts and authors of a recent book on Bill C-51 and Canadian anti-terrorist law. And to quote, "If the committee doesn't have full access to classified intelligence, the committee will not be able to do its job." And Mr. Forsisi adds, "This is a good bill, although with inevitable flaws likely reflecting compromises designed to reconcile elements within the government." Even if Bill C-22 is a good start, even with the best review mechanism in the world, nothing can compensate for a bad initial law like C-51. It is important to not lose sight of the big picture. So that's very clear from somebody, and those words come from somebody who's very competent. It's very clear, Mr. Speaker, this new Parliamentary Oversight Committee needs to be a sufficient counterweight to ensure that the population regains their trust in these organizations and that it is able to prevent any abuses. And to that end, I would like to bring to the House, the attention of the House, the reports from excellent CBC Radio Canada journalists on the fact that from 2001 to 2004, Canadians were imprisoned and tortured in Syria with the complicity of Canadian authorities. After the attacks in New York in September of 2001, CSIS and the RCMP wanted to prove al-Qaeda cells in the country, and in the end, they contributed to massive violations of human rights. And they were complicit in the torture of 3 individuals in Syria. CBC Radio Canada had to go through 18,000 documents to shed light on this affair. Let's be clear. Support for torture is unacceptable, and this way of working is not acceptable either. Until we have a proper parliamentary committee with the right tools and the right resources, it will be up to talented people in newsrooms like at CBC Radio Canada to ensure that our governmental institutions and our national security organizations don't abuse their power. I think it's time that we put this tool in place so that Quebecers and Canadians have confidence in the institutions that are in charge of protecting us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Questions and comments?
For Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for his comments. I note in correspondence that was sent from the opposition critic for public safety and emergency preparedness from the Conservative Party that several attempts to foster a collaborative and informed dialogue on our national security and its oversight were made by both our party, our caucus, and the NDP caucus without any response, and actually no consultations with members on the opposition side of the House. I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. And she's put her finger on something that is a real characteristic of this government. Something that this government is very good at doing, let's be clear, is communications. They know that. They're very good at it. So they've been spinning this. They say that it's going to be great, sunny ways, all that. And the message is constant, and it's a very well-run campaign. The media is happy, and, well, everyone, hears the same thing. And they say, oh, everything is great. And the dark days are over. No, but the truth is that this government, over the summer, announced all kinds of fundamental decisions where parliamentarians should have been consulted and debated, and we weren't able to do that. So I would agree with the honourable member. The fact that we're giving the Prime Minister the right to choose everything here, the fact that this committee is made up of nice promises, well, so far, in just 1 year, we've already been very disappointed with the fact that the government hasn't been as transparent as it promised to be. Questions and comments?
Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that as a first step, of course, this bill will move us a lot farther down the road than we've been. And with the dynamics of our friends on the opposite side, I think that, well, what was that term that we've used? Better is always possible. So we'll work on that. But I wanted to specifically focus in on one thing and ask the honourable member about the value of having the work of this committee apply to the work in progress by these agencies, not just after the fact, not just when something has come up, but in fact the ability to see the moving parts and to perhaps intervene and to comment at that time.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his very appropriate question. And I think that Canadians are very aware that it's very good to have this bill forward, that it is important to have oversight of operations as they take place and not after the fact. But I will go back to, well, what has been said many times by your government, the government's promise to change Bill C-51, and so far that's been pushed back. The government's decided to put in place a committee, an oversight committee, but with C-51, we're multiplying everyone's work because everyone could potentially be under surveillance. And I know that this is work where you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but with the C-51, they're bringing a lot of hay. Questions and comments?
Very short question. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to be short and sweet. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his excellent speech. And it sounded like there are a good number of people in this place who would like some changes in this process. Why are we just starting? Why don't we actually implement the Oversight Committee? I think a number of amendments are going to be brought forward by our members. Certainly there's concern that the government can still preemptively halt a confidential investigation by the Committee on National Security. Isn't that the very point of the committee?
Briefly, the Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Well, what we see here is a desire to deal with problems, or to try to fix problems that have a very popular resonance. A lot of people have found that these security issues, well, on the one hand, we're talking about them constantly for good reasons, because there are issues around the world that need to be dealt with, and everyone is also very concerned about the potential abuses that could take place. If we think, for example, about for Indigenous people who with C-51 are potential suspects because they oppose pipelines. So we need to deal with these issues, and that's very concerning to see that the Liberal campaign identified a popular issue, and they promised to the moon and the stars, but we need to keep an eye on them because we know that they tend to signal left but go right after an election.
Resuming debate. Seeing none. Is the House ready for the question? The question is as follows. Ms. Shager, excuse me. Ms. Chager, seconded by Ms. Freeland, move that Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and to make consequential amendments to certain acts, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Okay. All those in favour of the motion, please say yea. Yay! All those opposed will please say nay. No! In my opinion, the yeas have it. Where are we here? Pursuant to Standing Order 45, the recorded division stands deferred until Monday, October 3rd, 2016, at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment. We have a point being raised by the Honourable Government Whip.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I think if you would seek it, you would find unanimous consent that, notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, the recorded division on the motion for second reading of Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, and to make consequential amendments to certain acts, be further deferred until the expiry of the time provided for oral questions on Tuesday, October 4th, 2016.
Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? Agreed? The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it then the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. The Honourable Government Whip.
Speaker, this is good news. Mr. Speaker, I think if you would seek it, you would find unanimous consent to see the clock at 1:30.
I'm sorry? Okay. Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to the motion? Agreed. The House has agreed to the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. It being 1:30, the House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, affaires émanant des députés, resuming debate at second reading of Bill C-227, an act to amend the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act, standing in the name of Mr. Hussain.
Before resuming debate, I want to remind the honourable members that there are other members who are debating. If they have a discussion, maybe they can take it to the lobby or just maybe whisper to each other rather than talking out loud. The honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I speak in favour of Bill C-227, Community Benefits Agreement. As a member of Sault Ste. Marie, I campaigned on historic infrastructure investments of $125 billion over 10 years. And I strongly believe that if the government wants to, that investments will have important impacts on regions and communities, and this such bill will have that effect. Bill C-227 will amend Section 20 of the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act to include provisions that will give the minister the flexibility to require bidders on federal projects to include information on the community benefits of said projects that will have on a local community. For the purposes of this bill, the Community Benefit Agreement, CBAs, are defined as social or economic benefits that a community obtains from a public works project. These benefits can include local job creation and training opportunities, improvements of public space within the community, and any other specific benefit identified by such community. It is a bill modeled on existing legislation in the province of Ontario, which has earlier implemented and is a great fit with this government's priorities. In my riding of Sault Ste. Marie, the steel industry, including companies like SR Steel, Algoma, and Tenaris Algoma Tubes, are plagued with challenges. Global overcapacity, weak demand has put domestic steel producers in jeopardy and is threatening the livelihood of many people and their families. Many have already been laid off. Good paying jobs in Northern Ontario, Mr. Speaker, are hard to come by. As a former city councillor and someone who has worked in economic development in Sault Ste. Marie and Northern Ontario for many years, I know that economic development, diversification, and investments in key infrastructure projects are more important today than ever. In fact, Mr. Speaker, Sault Ste. Marie's unemployment rate over the last few years has been in double digits. Investment in infrastructure and Bill C-227 in combination will work to ensure that historic investments our government is delivering have direct impacts which lever the existing skills and expertise of local business and individuals in my riding and ridings across this country. As someone who has worked in training and with the trades, it is my hope, once passed, this legislation will also lead to more opportunities to train and develop a skilled workforce. CBAs are a new approach to empowering local communities to partner with developers in order to respond to local challenges, and through encouraging activities like training can lead to economic development and growth, poverty reduction, environmental sustainability in neighbourhoods across Canada. Canadians in particular are struggling economically and need a boost. Our government is working to deliver on a procurement and modernization agenda, and the constituents of my riding, like many others, want the Government of Canada to step up the plate after years of neglect to ensure that Canadians are not left behind. I think of, Mr. Speaker, an example in my riding of community benefits that our First Nations partners have put in play many years ago, and we should look to our First Nations as a leader in developing community benefits. Highway 17, the 4-laning that went through my riding a few years ago, our First Nation of Garden River sat down and said we would like to see some community benefits, and they listed a number of things, including employment of Garden River people, training, using local aggregates, and also subbing with local businesses. I think we can learn a lesson from our First Nation friends that this is a good thing, and it really helped Garden River. And I know that our chief, Paul Surratt, is a leader in this area and will continue to do so. I've been able to speak with the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, Christian Provenzano, and many city councillors, and they believe that this is a good thing that will really help our economy that's been struggling over the last few years. The Government of Canada has an opportunity to work directly with many communities across this area to dictate these community benefits. I use another historical example of when I was working in the trades. We used to certify various people that would come to town to work. And the previous stimulus funding that was based on infrastructure had the effect of creating a lot of economic opportunities, but there could have been more, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker. I use the example that there were some tradespeople that were coming in to get certification in the area so that they could work that weren't from the community area. They weren't from even Northern Ontario. They weren't from Ontario. They weren't from Quebec. They weren't from British Columbia. They weren't from Alberta. They were from the United States because they, Sault Ste. Marie being on the border of America, had managed to come over and work. I have nothing against my American cousins, But sometimes when the government spends infrastructure funding and monies, they should direct the community benefits. Because again, I've told you that our economy has been suffering over the last few years, and it was an opportunity where other tradespeople from the area, from Sault Ste. Marie, Northern Ontario, or across the country, could have been working, but instead they weren't. So that's just two anecdotal examples where community benefits in play have helped a community like Garden River, and when community benefits were not in play, and how there was a bit of seepage, if you will. I believe that our government has also invested greatly in many opportunities in infrastructure spending in our area, and there are many federal projects that could be invested in and expand on. So this gives the minister the ability to work with local communities, and I'd like to thank, I'd be remiss without thanking the member from York Southwestern for introducing this great bill and his hard work, because I know that he has been gone coast to coast across the country, talking with many businesses, talking with labor organizations, talking with communities, with community leaders, with organizations, and I'm not going to steal his thunder. I know he's speaking later, but there was very positive results in that consultation and hard work. So my hat goes off to the member from York Southwestern, who has been working very, very, very hard. And this is really important. It's a critical time for us to invest in infrastructure to get this economy going, because it's of utmost importance, not just for my generation, but for generations for our daughters, like my daughter Kate Sheehan, who is visiting Ottawa today on a professional development day. But we have to think about her and what her future is going to look like in Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. So I'm very pleased that we can dictate these community benefits that are going to help the riding of Sault Ste. Marie and the area around it. So the people from Batchewana First Nation, we're going to have opportunities for Prince Township. We're going to have opportunities for Hayden, for Searchmount. There are untold opportunities, and I think this is just the beginning. And I think that we could take a look at this and say, how can we expand this to have more impact? Because with our historic spending, $125 billion over 10 years is absolutely remarkable. And of course, the spending is important to the steel industry because infrastructure projects use steel. And of course, being the chair of the co-chair of the Steel Caucus, recognized that there is plenty of opportunities for us to have steel in our infrastructure program. And I know it's going to be extremely beneficial for places like Sault Ste. Marie, Northern Ontario, Ontario, and the rest of Canada. I cannot also tell you enough about how I've been talking with local community leaders and how they are totally looking forward to announcements. And I'm looking forward to making announcements in the future in my riding, and working with those community leaders to see how they prioritize which infrastructure programs they believe are important. And also, not only that, let's engage them again and say, okay, how can we benefit your community more? How can we get people working? How can we get people into the trades? How can we, have local contractors working on these infrastructure programs? So again, thank you very much for the member for York Southwestern. It's an honor to be a co-seconder on this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciated my colleague's speech on this Bill C-227, the Community Benefits Bill. Like my colleague, I too was a city councillor, having spent 9 years with the city of Barrie before being elected to this wonderful institution. Mr. Speaker, it's my honor to rise on behalf of the residents of Barrie Innisfil today and speak to Bill 227, a bill brought forward in all the best intentions, but in my opinion, and I say this with all due respect to the member from York Southwestern, fails in the reality of what he may be trying to propose here. Mr. Speaker, this bill deals with federal infrastructure projects but does not stray far from the process for municipal projects that many here in the House are familiar with. There are, Mr. Speaker, 77 members of this House that have municipal political experience. 36 of those members are of the government. The planning process goes through many different phases, from determining a need, the drawing up of an idea, and the drafting of the building rationale and the production of the plans. Each of my 76 colleagues who have served locally know that you cannot, Mr. Speaker, add red tape to ensure a community benefit. In the process of a project, there's always the benefit that a new project is going to bring to the community, the discussion of the benefit, and that really, Mr. Speaker, starts at the beginning. If it's a new LRT plan, it's to increase transit ridership. New roads means goods move faster. Wastewater systems means safer water. And housing funding means affordable housing. What does Bill C-227 mean for federal employees that fall under this? Has their work managing federal infrastructure projects been subpar? Have the women and men of PWGS been operating under the guise that there's no such thing as a community benefit? There is always, Mr. Speaker, always a community benefit, and our federal departments are always working with the needs and the benefits of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Infrastructure announced funding for municipal projects, he stated on May 5th, 2016, "We respect the ability of municipal governments to make their own decisions." Does the member for York South-Weston naturally assume that he does not feel the same for federal employees and our provincial partners? Let's be clear. This bill aims to add red tape and bureaucracy to a process that already has safeguards built into it. The bill intends to add 3 new reporting mechanisms to every federal infrastructure project. First stage of the new reporting will come in pre-attribution. This is a repetition of the work being done from the start and an idea and the determining of a need, the benefits of the project, the benefits of the community the project will serve, and Mr. Speaker, will these proposed projects not come under the watchful eye of the public during consultations? Is this step of a pre-attribution report nothing more than a repeat of the project application process? Mr. Speaker, I've been a part of many public consultations in the City of Barrie. The public in these consultations have a key eye for the community benefit of each and every project. Our residents can see waste a mile away. There's no need for a new step in the beginning to determine if a funding project is a worthwhile endeavor by the government. The second new mandated report will take place during a project, ongoing report during the works of the project. The most common reasons for increased costs of construction are delays. Delays are deadly to the life cycle of a project. It costs the project manager, the construction company, inspectors, and the federal government. The life cycle of a project has milestones, and these milestones and the timeline in these milestones are watched and mitigated by the project handlers themselves. These milestone reports form much of the reporting after completion. It will be difficult to determine just how community benefits are being met during construction. Mr. Speaker, time is money. Bill C-227 will add time and money to the cost of every federal project at a time when many feel that we take too long to complete a project today. Let me now address the third proposed mandatory reporting after the project is complete. This perhaps is the only real beneficial step in what's being proposed with this bill. We do need to find accountability in the work that's being done and funded by Canadians. Gaps found in a post-evaluation can be addressed for future projects. But this does not need to be mandated. In the world of project management, a post-completion review is part of a current rigorous process. Why entrench it further, Mr. Speaker, when there is no need to? Mr. Speaker, this bill requires that we add some very important questions addressing red flag concerns. Number one is, where will the cost of the extra work be covered? Will it come from within the department budget? Will the red tape be paid for by project funding received by the very same minister that is asking for the review? Will there be a need to hire to meet new expanded reporting demands that this bill creates? This government is starting to sound like the government of Ontario, becoming a leading new hire employer. The private sector, not the government, should be leading with the job creation. Will the government be forced to hire to cover the extra workloads? These are all fair questions, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister was gearing up for the election, he spoke at the FCM conference in Edmonton in June in 2015, and he said, "We will make it easier for municipalities to get shovels in the ground by removing the requirement that virtually every project must go through that too often results in unilateral federal decisions." The Prime Minister went on to say, "And we will make sure that the investment gets to you when you need it, not when it's politically convenient for the federal government to send it your way." And Mr. Speaker, he concluded his speech by proclaiming to municipal leaders that I want you to know that with the right partner in Ottawa, you have a real partnership with Ottawa, a partner that respects your experience, that respects municipalities' experiences. Does this statement exclude federal departments, Mr. Speaker? Does the trust the Prime Minister has for municipalities not extend to the hard-working men and women of our public service? Additional bureaucracy does not send a message of trust. It says we need to watch you a little closer. As the member from Spadina-Fort York once wrote in a blog post from May 2015 when he was a member in Parliament for the old Toronto riding of Trinity-Spadina, unlike complex funding programs, direct revenue does not require a new ministry or massive bureaucracy for oversight. That was the current member from Trinity-Spadina from 2015. Mr. Speaker, we believe in the transparency of government, but we do not believe that you need to add more regulation and rules to it. In closing, Mr. Speaker, myself, along with 76 other colleagues in this House, including 36 from the government side, know all too well the red tape and bureaucracy that exists in getting projects completed from idea to the completion of construction. The last thing needed is another level of red tape and the threat of a federal ministerial review for community benefits that have already been proven at their local level. We would not accept this at the municipal level. And as a resident of Ontario, Mr. Speaker, I've witnessed firsthand wasted tax dollars and the effect of over 300,000 plus regulations by the McGuinty and Wynne Liberals. My fear, Mr. Speaker, is that the federal Liberals are taking us down the same path at the national level. And why should we accept that at the federal level? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise du débat, l'honorable. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.
Monsieur le Président, les ententes sur les
Mr. Speaker, agreements on local benefits are at the heart of social and economic development at the local level. It seems today that the implementation of such an agreement is a progressive idea and an opportunity that we need to seize. I'd like to say that I will be supporting this bill at second reading. The NDP thinks that it's necessary to promote at the local level growth, training, and jobs by increasing investments in public infrastructure and by promoting local benefits agreements. This government promised change to Canadians, and I'm happy to see today that they're finally getting to work. They've committed, among other things, to massive investments in infrastructure, and we're still waiting for those. The local benefits agreements will be useful not only in my riding, but in all ridings. In Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte, many major infrastructure projects are waiting for federal funding. I'd like to talk about a major project, the extension of a boulevard in Saint-Hyacinthe, which I hope would be a part of this kind of agreement and assessment. As a former municipal councillor, I can tell you that everyone in Saint-Hyacinthe knows exactly what I'm talking about. This boulevard needs the construction of a railway bridge. And this is an important project for the Ville because it will make access to the industrial park easier. Federal funding for this project has been in the pipeline or has been expected for over 10 years, and I'll say that again, over 10 years. Extending Casavant Boulevard is necessary for growth in Saint-Hyacinthe. It's essential that the federal government act quickly and in a structural way to move forward on this file so that we can finish work on this important infrastructure. Extending this boulevard would bring community benefits. It will create good jobs, it will breathe life into the local economy, and it will lead to opportunities for training. It will definitely stimulate growth, and it will definitely lead to the creation of wealth, and it will undoubtedly lead to more responsible growth. If I have no doubt on the good that this project would bring to my riding, well, I'm still skeptical about some aspects of this bill. I think that this bill can be improved in a number of points. In my riding, it's important to work with local businesses. Saint-Hyacinthe is well known as being a pole for innovative agriculture and agri-food at the world level. We need to continue to promote innovation at the regional level. We know that when our businesses do well, our economy does well at the same time. What the NDP wants to see is to see local organizations, local businesses, and local citizens included in the planning process for infrastructure spending. What the NDP wants to do is ensure that the benefits of these spending projects are felt locally, it seems, just to make good common sense. This bill doesn't require that bidders submit all information to all interveners, and that seems to me to be very important information for all. This bill also doesn't indicate how benefits will be calculated, nor does it mention what goals are targeted in these agreements. We believe that the bill should include a targeted recruitment policy to ensure that local businesses and local citizens are included. As my honourable colleague who sponsored this bill has mentioned, community benefits have the goal of creating wealth, creating good jobs, training opportunities, responsible growth, and other benefits at the local level. These are honourable goals, but how can we be sure that these will be applied if they're not even mentioned in the bill? I would suggest that we include guiding principles that would focus on equality, fairness, eco-friendly practices, and the inclusion of marginalized groups. I'd like to come back to one word. It's a small word, but it's very important, and that is the word few, which we find in Section 2 of the bill. Or rather, may, I should say. The word may in Section 2. The minister may, before awarding a contract for the construction, maintenance, or repair of public works, federal real property, or federal immovables, require bidders on the proposal to provide information on the community benefits that the project will provide. That's Section 2 of the bill. So the minister may, but why not write the minister must? What that means is that the requirement for community benefits is left at the discretion of the minister. Really? At the discretion of the minister. So nothing in this ensures that the community benefits will indeed be applied. Mr. Speaker, if we really want to see change, if we really want to create wealth locally, this should not be left at the discretion of the minister. If we truly want to see local benefits, well, we should ensure that there's a clear structure, that it's not left unclear or at the discretion of the minister, as is the case here. These agreements should explicitly be part of the mandate of the Minister for Infrastructure. Without that, nothing will require the government to be accountable on whether or not these policies are successful. I'd like to believe in this bill, and I would like to see it become a reality in our regions. However, when I look at the conditions required by the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I can't help but feel pessimistic. My honourable colleague, when he tabled this bill, mentioned that Bill 6 from the Government of Ontario survived under free trade agreements. But Bill C-227 must do more than survive under trade agreements. And in Chapter 15 of TPP, it's not clear if criteria such as those of community benefits would go against the agreement. If that's the case, this bill could expose Canada to trade challenges. The government is pushing ahead to ratify TPP without worrying about some of the effects that it will have. And let's not forget Ontario's Bill C6, which is similar to this bill, was never has never been used at the same time as the TPP. So I wonder what will happen to that bill once TPP actually comes into effect. It seems to me that a number of changes need to be made to this bill to ensure that these initiatives become reality, and that despite the desire to include marginalized populations in development. As I've said, our will is not to have with this bill a missed opportunity. These community benefits agreements need to come into reality. We need to offer our regions and local citizens real opportunities for social and economic development. We need to invest locally. We need to build a generation of qualified workers who will create a pool of talent for our industry, as has been reckoned by a number of unions. We need to stimulate economic growth in our regions. We need to encourage social and economic growth in our ridings and in our regions. By acting together to make our regional economies models for development, we can do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for York South Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise today to speak to my private member's bill, Bill C-227, an act to amend the Public Works and Government Services Act, community benefit. Community benefits are defined as the benefits obtained by a community above and beyond the infrastructure project itself. These include but are not limited to local job creation, paid training, affordable housing, green space, or any other benefit identified by the community itself. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues have brought up some concerns regarding this bill in today's debate and previously. I'd like to address some of them. It is in fact a myth that this bill will increase red tape and increase costs for small and medium-sized businesses. It's not true. In fact, Bill C-227 speeds up the approval process, thereby saving money for small and medium-sized businesses. When you have communities consulted on the kinds of benefit that they would like from an infrastructure project and can see those benefits being obtained from an infrastructure project, they are more likely to support the development process and speed up the approval process for new development, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is also a myth that business groups and other organizations oppose Bill C-227. In fact, the Toronto Board of Trade, the Vancouver Board of Trade, the Montreal Board of Trade, and many other organizations have come out strongly for community benefit agreements as a good way, as a good economic policy to tackle youth unemployment and also to deal with the issue of including marginalized groups that are not included in the construction industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is also a complete myth that Bill C-227 did not receive adequate consultation. The fact is I have consulted extensively on this bill, Mr. Speaker, all across the country. The groups that I have spoken to include, but are not limited to, the United Way, the Toronto Community Benefits Network, the Atkinson Foundation, the Mowat Centre, the Canadian Building Trades Union, the Canadian Labour Council, the Carpenters Union, the Province of Ontario, the City of Vancouver, and many others. The Mowat Centre and Atkinson Foundation have jointly published numerous studies that have stressed the importance of community benefit agreements for local economic growth. I have consulted all levels of government in the provinces across Canada. But having said that, my consultation process is ongoing, and I have already planned many meetings across the country to make sure that I continue to consult widely on Bill C-227. Mr. Speaker, this bill is modelled on Ontario's legislation, Bill C-6. And the beauty of that is we're able to now understand what has worked and what is not working with the Ontario legislation. As such, for example, Bill C-227 addresses the concern about implementation and measurement of outcomes. It does so in two ways. First, this bill empowers the Minister of Public Works and Government Services to demand from contractors to demonstrate what they think the community benefits would be from an infrastructure project, and also demand an assessment after the completion of the project to see whether those benefits were indeed delivered. Secondly, it also requires the Minister to report back to Parliament once a year to show how the community benefited from various select building and repair projects. Community benefit agreements are also in line with our government's priorities, including procurement modernization and social infrastructure promotion. I'm asking my colleagues from all sides of the House to support this bill, Bill C-227. Help me to enable communities all across Canada to benefit from building and repair projects. Mr. Speaker, I was elected to Parliament to represent HoC Southwestern, to push and propose legislation that would benefit my constituents. Bill C-227 does exactly that by dramatically improving the economic local impact that infrastructure has in local communities across Canada. This will help HoC Southwestern and many, many other communities across this great country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
La Chambre est-elle prête à se
Is the House ready for the question?
La suivante.
Question is as follows.
Mr. Hussain, seconded by Mr. Anasandalangri, move that Bill C-227, an act to amend the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Is the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. All those in favour of the motion, please say yea. Yea. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 93, the Recorded Division stands deferred until Wednesday, October 5th, 2016, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. Okay. It being 1:15, the House stands adjourned until next Monday at 11 a.m., pursuant to Standing Order 24-1. Thank you.